Okay, greetings and welcome back once again, everyone. My name is Ramona. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special conversation. I know I have been delayed. It's late. It was my part. I misunderstood, but we're here now. And we're glad that you are here. And we have special guest Ari Joseph as well as Sister Mariana. But our special guest who's new to the channel, Ari Joseph, welcome. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And Sister Mariana, are you well? She's over there talking on you. She's well as well. But so, as you see in the title, today's conversation is going to be about polygyny, but in a little different way. We're going to hone in on the women. Why? Because, oftentimes we're sold polygyny on the front end. All of the bells, the whistles, all of the benefits, the things that can come about because one would invest in this lifestyle. But there's a back end that oftentimes are underbelly. Underbelly sounds a little nefarious. Let's call it a back end that sometimes we don't see, we don't consider. And, I want to be honest and transparent in putting this panel together. Some women were telling me I'm private. I don't want to share that, right? So some of the stuff that actually happens, we don't get to hear about it because the women feel like there's not a space or a place for people to appreciate. What are your thoughts on that, Ari, as it relates to having an open place for people to hear you about polygyny?
There aren't many spaces, for that, for sure. So it's always good when you have platforms that are speaking to the reality of polygyny. Um, Kind of what we discussed not too long ago about the fantasy
Mm-hmm.
or the sensationalization of the lifestyle. You see it on TV, and you don't see what happens when on these shows. You don't see what happens when the cameras go off.
Right.
You don't see the type of work and the type of emotional drain that it can have on you. And this can be from the first wife's perspective, the second or
Right.
the third. You also have to include or consider the children
Yes.
because they're heavily affected by these these relationship constructs. But no, there aren't many spaces, particularly when it comes to Black people, African Americans,
Right.
or Africans throughout the diaspora practicing polygyny. We don't hear a lot about it, and I know that there are success stories. There are really great stories of it, but we don't hear either. We
Right.
just don't hear about it. So um, more and more, I believe there needs to be more platforms. There needs to be more talk around it so that people fully understand what they're doing.
I,
Um,
I agree. So
yeah.
speaking of the allure, let's start at the beginning. The sales pitch, the what's drawing the line to bring them in. What in your experience is some of that allure into? I know sisterhood is one of them. That's a big
Mhm.
talking point.
Yeah, sisterhood is like the big thing, right? And then having support with the children. It takes a village to raise a child. So if you have more than one mom, more than one brain, hands, what have you, then the children are fully supported. And then that means that you don't have to work as hard. So you have somebody to help around the house with chores, with children. Um, Even with the husband, there's a lot of women that would say, I can't give my husband as much attention, or he has a lot of energy and
Right.
I just can't keep up. So they would rather have another woman. Another lure is I don't want any more kids, but she
Mm-hmm.
can have them.
Right. Right.
So throw in a second wife or the third, and they can have the baby. So you have that allure. Another allure, um, or thing that draws them in is the financial aspect of it. If
Mm-hmm.
you have all of these multiple incomes coming in, then you'll have more opportunity to invest, to build, quote unquote, or to do all these different things.
Right.
Um, I mean, you have an ability to do a lot of things. If you want to grow your own food garden, if you want to work from home, you having all these incomes, you guys can combine your income and build a business or something like that. It's really, the social economic lore, honestly,
I
from a
would agree.
economic
Those are
standpoint.
all of the talking points that we've heard over the years: nation building, economic wealth, like you said, with the children. And so, for those who look beyond the sharing of the men,
Hmm.
right, and say that's not really that big of a deal, I could see why it would be like, okay, you know what, let me explore that. Um, so if you're willing to share, you had some experience in this area. as well as being pulled in? Were those some of the talking points that made you say, or was there one in particular that made you say, you know what, I'm gonna go for that. That sounds like something I want to do.
Yeah, the one of the biggest talking points that pulled me in personally
Mm-hmm.
was the idea of me not having to work outside the home and
Oh,
being
okay.
able to work toward my own business or to focus on things that I wanted to focus on, you know.
Right.
And then one of the second things was just not being a single mom, you know, having support. Not only do I have a husband, but now I have a sister wife.
Right.
So that was huge. That was a big lure for me. And then the third thing was the financial aspect. Having a husband to help with finances and help support. That was also big. So those three things were what pulled me in.
What pulled you in? Well, thank you
Hmm.
for being so honest and transparent. Because what I found, I've had this conversation a lot over the years for those who know me, and people sometimes kind of drape or kind of hide, what it's really about, and they try to, if they come from a religious space, they say it's about being religious and being elevated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever space they're coming from, they kind of brush it with a color that's going to either make you feel compelled or repelled into.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, so you were attracted to a family that didn't necessarily have the religious trappings.
Mm-mm. No, they were, they considered themselves spiritual. So none of this was done because out of religion or out of
Right.
religious obligation, so to speak. This was all because I wanted to. It was all because I believed in the bigger picture. I
Yeah.
believed that I was bringing something to the dynamic, support, you know, finances, that kind of thing. And I believe that they were bringing something to my life as well. So it was really, you know, thinking about the mechanics of it. It was
Mm-hmm.
more about the practical side of polygyny for me. And it was less about the whole religious, I got to
Right.
do it because, you know, God
Right.
said.
Right. Right. Which is what a lot of, even I studied Mormons for a lot of years, and it's like that component is like, if you're going to hell and you're not going to have spirit babies, like the women are really jarred by this thought of not, having spirit babies, and so that kind of element, when it's removed, it allows for a bit more of a clearer view of why
Yes.
someone would do it outside of religious compulsion. So that's interesting. That is really interesting. Okay, so um, what's the question I was going to ask? So it took you, to my understanding, it took you a while to say, you know what, this is the family I want to go. How did you court, or how did you vet the family that you decided to say, you know what, let me work with this family?
I'll say this: the religious aspects, or um, let's say, for instance, Islam.
Mm-hmm.
The approach.
Ari, your sound went out.
Am I still there?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. The religious, you know, perspective is, you know, when you have wives, they all are treated the same or
Mm-hmm.
equally. What you do for one, you do for the other, that kind of thing, which is good. You know, another approach from that particular religion is that you court so the man and woman are not alone.
Yeah, right.
You're being vetted through a wali for the woman, toward the man. He's being vetted. You know, do you know this man? What's his integrity level? X, Y, and Z. What's his family like? I didn't have that protection. So I
Right.
would say that approaching polygyny from a religious standpoint offers protection for the women. I
Hmm.
didn't get the protection. My father is Christian, and he was not for it at all.
I was going to get to that, but so we
He
can
was
go there
not.
now because I was going to get to the family aspect. So when you thought, you considered it, did you bring it to your parents in the beginning?
I
Like,
did. I
uh-huh. So
brought.
tell us how that went.
Oh man. My father's an ordained minister, and my mother
Oh,
is yes. So they're like, what?
they're
And
like,
and
you
don't get me
tripping.
wrong. Like I even said, well, you know, polygyny is practiced in the Bible. He's like, but you're not. This man is not, that you're practicing polygyny with, is not religious. He doesn't
So
have
wait,
the
wait, wait.
religious
I'm sorry.
principles.
I'm getting excited. So you tried to put a biblical spin?
I did. I reminded him. I was like, you know, because Solomon and so and so and
Of
Abraham,
course.
and he's like, no. So
Wow.
he wasn't feeling it for many reasons.
Right.
One, you know, it wasn't how we were raised. So he's
Right.
like, you know, when you're dealing with women who are not raised in that particular lifestyle, it may not be something that will work.
Mm.
Particularly the men, you know, think about, and he started hitting me with statistics, and he's like, think about statistically what Black men make in America as far as finances. He was like, how much of your finances will have to go to the upkeep of this family? Now you're bringing on more children on top of your children. Think about, like, he was just, giving me a lot to think about, and it made sense. But because the person that I joined the union with, the guy who was my husband, he had everything figured out. So when it came to the finances, he made sure I understood, okay, this is what we can do. This is what I can provide. So basically his thing was, you don't have to work. That's what he said. So then I'm presenting this to my father, and he's like, okay. So everything, all the rebuttals that my dad had, I was able to kind of hit him with, well, this is what he's going to do. This is what we're doing. This is, and to be honest, when I first joined the union, it seemed so. It seemed that although, a lot of things didn't happen the way it did, and there was a lot of red flags in the beginning, I saw past it because I had already committed. I was already in it. Just like a relationship, a monogamous relationship. Women kind of do the same. If you put in a lot of work, courting and getting to know folks, and then you fall for them and you want to move forward, you start to see maybe red flags, but you're like, oh, well,
it'll get better. It'll go away.
Yeah, it'll get better. Well, I can help with that. That kind of thing.
Right. So you need to smooth it out. Give me some spray stuff. Yeah,
that's it. Like, polygyny is really no different, in that regard. We go in thinking, okay, this man loves me. I love this man. This is my sister, and, those kind of things. And so when I start to see the small things pop up, I'm thinking, okay, we can fix this. We can figure it out, or what have you. But things quickly progressed downward. And I was in that union all of but 9 months. So yeah, that union, and honestly, those people are a special case. I'll say that.
So before we get to the 9 months, because I wanted to understand what it takes now. Somebody, you're courting, they're in your mind, you're sold on the idea, and now you had children at the time.
Yes.
And so now you have to pack yourself up and your children up. What was that like? Were you having like reservations, or were you like, this is going to work, I'm going to make this work? What was that like when you were packing your life up essentially to move to this place?
Oh man. There's a difference between moving when you're ready and moving when you're being made to move, or kind of pushed. Yeah. And so I wasn't ready to leave because I had my own space. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own money, my own, I'm taking care of myself in that way. But I was willing to, give those things up to join this family and to bring whatever resources, talents, and skills I had, right, to that union. It was scary. It was very scary. I was not with it at first. I was very apprehensive, but he did so much. He's a charmer, gift of gab, and he did so much to get me convinced. And he actually helped with the move. He came and he drove the truck, the U-Haul truck. So yeah, well, I'm sorry, no, he didn't. I ended up, what was it? I drove. He came and drove with. He flew down and we drove back. So I went from Louisiana to Atlanta, which is like a 7-8 hour drive. But I ended up selling all of my stuff. He had me sell all of my stuff. Like, I sold everything. And what I couldn't sell, I gave away. So he's like, we're going to replace it all. And I believe that. So I sold everything. And when he came, he flew in, we drove out, and that was it. The reservations that I had, like I said, he kind of talked me out of it. And he assured me that everything would work. And of course, it was more so her. See, one of the things that I noticed about polygyny in the Western practice is that the women tend to help pull other women in by
the talent scout.
Yes.
The recruiter.
Right, exactly. Because they know, women, when a woman approaches you rather than the man, then that kind of takes your guard down.
It disarms
you. Yeah, it's very disarming. And you're like, oh. And then, especially if the sister is attractive and she's sweet and she's kind and she's saying all the right things, and you're like, oh my God. Yes.
Right. There's no wolf in the back. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Exactly. Right. And you look at her and you're thinking, yes, she's happy, she's stable. I want that for myself too, And so
Ari,
Yes,
Can I, would it be fair to say that if you see that the woman seems comfortable and is on board, that that helps you feel comfortable with entering the union because you don't have to worry that she may be harboring some kind of resentment to you entering the union?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she and I became like really, really close, very
Mm-hmm.
close, and we built a relationship. So it wasn't just him; it was her too.
Wow.
She definitely disarmed me. She definitely made me feel comfortable joining the union. I didn't think for a second that she would be jealous or she would be, either of these things, because I felt like, oh, she's ready. She's looking for
Right.
me.
Right.
And so that kind of lends to and speaks to the search for sisterhood. If the
Yes.
woman, right? So okay, because that's the other component in the benefit column is that sisterhood. That since I would venture to say that you've also heard or experienced the idea that women typically don't believe they get along with other women, and
Right.
so dispelling that kind of notion and saying I can have healthy relationships with other women, and this is one of the ways that I'm willing to prove it. So that idea and search for sisterhood is something that a lot of melanated women get kind of
Pulled in.
denied, right?
Mhm.
Growing up, we start to internalize the idea of there's something wrong with other women. We don't have good relationships. We cannot trust them. And there's always this competition around the man. And so this polygyny paradigm offers kind of an out to that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely refreshing.
So
I
you
would
were
say it's,
checking boxes. You were checking everything was checking.
Right.
yes. Yes.
So
And
you're
it
in the U-Haul, um, and you're on your way, and everybody is loving and inviting, and so you, even though you had some reservations, you still say, "I'm going to go forward."
yeah. Yeah.
When you went forward and you arrived, you don't have to go like all the way into details.
Mhm.
Um, we have the thought like, should I? Did I? Did you have any of those thoughts when you finally got there, or were you just so overcome with the situation that you just threw caution to the wind?
Initially I did. I was like, oh, uh,
What did I do?
yeah, like what's going on?
Uh
But
oh.
what kind of made me be optimistic about it all is that, I had to remind myself, like, sis, you just sold all your stuff and gave up your apartment. So
So do you think the selling of all the stuff is to make sure that you don't have another place to put your foot back?
yep.
You think that's like to isolate the person? Wow.
Correct.
Absolutely. That I after leaving the situation, I look back and I'm like, yeah, he put me in a place where I
He
didn't have
made
support.
sure. Yeah.
He moved me from my support, which was back home in
Right.
Louisiana. He, put me in a place where I could not, because I actually wanted to keep my apartment. Just, I was like, we don't have to break the lease. Let me just keep it and let my cousin stay in just in case things don't work. Because I
Right.
want to have a safety net at this point.
Safety net.
Correct.
And he's like, no, no, he was very, very adamant about that. And it was kind of scary, but I
Mm.
just thought that, he was like, we're in this for the long haul type situation. So when he said that, I'm like, oh, okay, well,
It made you
then
feel,
I'll
even
just,
though you were uncertain, it made you feel secure. And people, for those who are tuning in, we need to look at, because there's a pattern. We're not, this is a specific situation, but we have to understand that even monogamous relationships, there's a pattern.
mhm,
Isolation from support group, from your family, get you into
Correct.
a space where you may not mentally you feel like I can't escape here because I have nowhere else to go. All of
correct.
these are those little flags. All of these are, they say they're green flags and red flags, but these are definitely red flags, especially if the person is adamant, like you're saying, against your own wishes, like I'm not ready to let go, and they're prying it away from you. That's definitely something to look
Mhm.
into. So you let go reluctantly, and you're still moving forward, which I could put my hand up. I have done some crazy stuff where you're like, why am I doing this? Right? And you
Mhm.
still keep, it's like, don't go in the room. And you keep going and you like one of those horror movies.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, but yeah, go ahead. So you're there and you're still leery, but you get right into family life now, the other
Yes.
side of the promise.
I see the children. They're so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
The sister wife, she started off very, very nice, very accommodating. She and I had so much in common. So I just kind of was thrown into the fold of things,
Right.
and I liked it. I wanted to. The thing was, I really wanted it to work. So
Mm.
I wanted, like, any inkling of of the promise, let's just say
Yeah, the
that,
promise.
any inkling of it, I was excited. I was like, oh, okay, this is
It's
what
working.
he said. And that's what she said. Okay. So I have it. So even if I had apprehensions or even if I saw a red flag, it was the promise. It was the idea that was sold to me, right? And the experience that was sold that I was looking for. And if I saw little pieces and bits of it, I was excited about it. And I was
Wow.
hopeful. So it kept me continuing to be there. And to be honest, the first month and a half was great. It really was, because this is the month where we're all getting to know each other. This is
The
the month.
honeymoon phase.
Huh?
Right.
The
Yes,
honeymoon phase.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So they're putting their best foot forward and that kind of
Right.
thing. So in the beginning, all of these things, you know, oh, we eat as a family type situation. We light an incense before we eat, and all of these things, you know, we don't wear shoes in the house. And,
Right.
you know, you're teaching me and some of those things I was actually doing as well.
Doing
But,
already.
it, you know, we're learning all these things, and it was just exciting. It was exciting. It was alluring. It was comforting, you know, and I really thought that what was promised to me was happening.
Was being delivered. So
Hmm.
it was kind of surreal. Would you say it was kind of
Yes.
like the anticipation, and now I'm here, and there it is, and I can see it, and watching a flower bloom, right? And
Hmm.
that's kind of how some of us get into these spaces because
Yeah.
we're seeing what, like you said, what was promised, and that's what we want. We want to be loved. We want to be included. We want support. These are human things and desires that we want. So you're in there. The month and some change goes by. What moment for you was like, uh-oh? Like, right? Did you have a uh-oh moment? Like, oh, chill. I think
I
you had
did.
a moment. Okay.
My uh-oh moment was when I heard him yelling at her on the phone.
Hmm.
I had convinced him to allow us to go to the spa in Atlanta. Actually, it was outside of Atlanta. It's like 45 minutes outside of Atlanta.
Hmm.
And I convinced him to let us go, and he did. We got there, and he calls, and they're like going back and forth. And then I started hearing him yell and scream, and
Heard
I
that.
didn't even think that happens because of the way they
Mm.
present themselves. I thought that they talk things out, because this is what they told me. We don't
Right.
yell. He doesn't raise his voice. So
Mm.
I'm listening to him scream and holler at her on the phone. I'm like, what the hell is happening? And she's like, oh, you just go in and I'll come and catch up. And I'm like, oh God, and my children are there with this man who's yelling and screaming at you
Mm.
phone right now. And
Oh,
so that was the oh shit moment for me. Like, okay, something ain't right.
it's not what. So but I want to say. So you said you convinced him. This is not something that he was like. You know what? I want to send you to
No,
L.A. like we saw.
no.
I want to send you to wherever. This was you having to kind of pull teeth to get him to give her
Yeah,
a moment.
because she seemed very weighted with the responsibility of the children. He was
Right.
home and he was always in his office from sun up till sundown. He don't
Wow.
come out.
Mm.
Yes. So, you know, and I don't think all the time he was working. He was on that internet doing shit, you know, excuse my French.
Danny. No, Katie.
And I figured that out toward the end. But yeah, you know, he's in the office, so she's with the kids all day, and she just looks
That's
so
a
beat
lot.
down sometimes. And I'm thinking, okay, I understand why you need a sister wife. You know, that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I wanted her to get out, and I also wanted her and I to have a
To
bonding
kind of have a moment.
outside of the children, outside of him. So yeah, I had to like get at him and give him pitch the idea,
Right.
and then
And
I
so
had
he
to
bought
like.
it.
Right. And he picked it up. He was like, yeah, you're right. So he kept the kids, which was odd
Yeah.
because he never, he wasn't keeping the kids before, but he kept the kids, and she and I ended up going. And after the fussing and the screaming and whatnot, once she came in, she looked a little defeated, and
Mm.
she and I talked. She did not talk about what they
What
spoke.
happened?
Yeah, she didn't tell me.
But what
That
happened to
was
the sharing with the sister wife
Right.
and the.
That's not
Exactly.
sister.
There was no sharing. In
Mm.
fact, I find out toward the end of the relationship when I went through his phone to find out what the hell was happening around me, because everything had just went to shit. Excuse my French.
Mm.
I find that they were having these sidebar conversations all the time, and that they were having
Mm.
arguments amongst each other all the time, and that they talk badly to each other. They call each other
Wow.
names. Like, it was awful. It was really awful because there was even abuse. I was abused, and attacked in the situation. And I know for an absolute fact that he was abusing her. I'm sure I wasn't the isolated incident,
Right.
but the way that they sold themselves to me, it was supposed to be a situation where there was none of that.
None of that. So
Mona,
go ahead, sister. Go ahead.
there's a couple of takeaways that I'm recording so far, but one of the things that I think it's important just to kind of note, put a pin in, is that very often we think that women enter into these relationships because they don't have, or there's issues in their personal family life. I think that it's important to note here that Ari did say she had a father. She's not looking for a father figure. She doesn't come from a broken home. So
No.
this is a decision that she made. She spoke to her family. She did some research. She's not being completely enticed. And we talk about these things about enticing and being misled and the like. And there is some of that. The second part, there's a number of things, but the only two that I'm going to point on now is I wanted the listeners to know that we are accepting the fact that Ari is telling us she had a father. She did her research. There were conversations, and she wasn't just kind of kidnapped in the middle of the night and brought into this situation.
Right.
Right. So I'm gonna know why she's advocating that, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because that
Yes.
is something that people think is, oh, they have low self-esteem.
Right.
That's fine. Oh,
Right.
you have daddy issues.
Right.
Oh, she's just looking for a come up. She wants to,
Right.
leech off of these people. None of that.
Right.
None of
Because I know that
that.
we're about to go into the dissension of the relationship, but I think that before we go there, that it's important to establish that we're not trying to do a smear campaign. We are hearing you when you say you did have a father, that you were intelligently entering into this union, and that there are things that you looked for and paid attention to all along before it goes into this downward spiral. What I also wanted to say at this point before we go further is that we hear that the woman has an investment in keeping, you're seeing cracks in the promise, but the woman has an investment in covering those, right? So
Yes.
even though you're starting to become aware, you're starting to say, wait a minute, things are not adding up, she's coming back and saying, no, it's not really that, because the other woman now has an investment in keeping you. So we
Mhm.
talked about her in the recruiter role, and
Mhm.
now we see her doing damage control.
Yes.
And these, right, right. She's the complaint department. She's doing damage control. She's PR.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think this is important too. So we're looking at what Ari's experiences are, but it's good that we're hearing what the first wife's experience was, what her intentionality may have been, and the fact that she has her own investment. It's not just him. There are other things about this that are advantageous for her and why she might be motivated
To keep it
to
together.
correct. All right.
Right.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Go ahead, sister. Ari, to that, did you try and speak to Ashley about what you were seeing, or did she just try to, wipe her face and just get it back
I
together?
did. I did. We
Mhm.
had a lot of come to Jesus moments. Sister,
Mm-hmm.
sister, heart to heart.
Oh
We cried,
wow. Okay.
we cried together.
Mm-hmm.
It was centered around her experiences with other women and how he lied to her. She told me that he lied and had sex with one of the potentials before he was supposed to. She had disclosed to me that he had given her a venereal disease a year before I arrived, and the woman that she claimed it was a woman, or could have been one of the potentials that he slept with. So she, I saw that there was an infidelity.
Right.
Clearly, there was a lack of trust on
Right.
her part for him, and a lack of integrity on his part.
His part.
But at this point, we're like 2 months in now
Mm.
when that was disclosed to me. And, I'm like, okay.
That's what I want to say. What you like? I want to hug you, but I want to run.
But I
I'm
want
like,
to.
Like I'm trying to hold on to you, sister, but is it
you
too
know, at
late?
this point, I started to empathize with her, and I felt
Right.
bad. I felt like I didn't want to leave her, if that makes sense.
Her. See, right.
Yeah.
So
I didn't
now
want to
it's
leave
more
her.
about her than about him. Because you're
Yes.
prepared to leave him, but you
Yeah.
don't want to leave her in that
No.
situation. And
I
that's
really,
a very interesting thing that develops that I found in researching this is that sometimes the women feel like I don't want to abandon this other woman because I'm empathizing and connecting to that, and you feel
yeah,
protective more of this other woman than you
yeah,
do of the union that you went
yeah,
into, and you start to go into modes of self-sacrificing if it means you can save this other woman. And that's, but the other thing that you said that I thought was interesting is that previous to her accepting recruiting and keeping the reunion intact with you, there was a breach of trust.
Mhm.
So now I'm wondering, my question to maybe you know the answer to this is, did Ashley feel like this is something she can be open to, because at least now we're doing it on the front end and not in the back end. He's not sneaking around. There's a conversation. I got to meet you. I know you. And I feel that a sort of inevitability about this. And because she already feels defeated in the space of fidelity, as long as she's a participant in this sort of sharing of the man, that she's more on board with it. Did you get that
Yeah,
impression from her?
absolutely. What I found is that it was her taking her power back
Mm.
by saying, yeah, I agree with this. Yes, I'm going to be a part of the process. Yes, let's bring this woman in. But then her insecurities, her jealousy, all of that would set in, and every woman was thrown out of the house because of her.
Mm.
He wouldn't have gotten rid of the women. He
Right.
would have as many as he possibly could. It
Because,
was
and
her.
that's something I think to highlight, not in all families, but in some that try this relationship and fail and try and fail, there is a dynamic there. There's a self-sabotaging, if you will, that it becomes this revolving door. And
Yes.
to the jealousy, I came across some information where the sister said that she wasn't jealous. Was this another part of the facade to present that I'm not jealous so that you would feel comfortable in coming in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was another way to disarm me. Is to
Right.
tell me, well, we've been talking about this since we were together. And, I've always wanted a polygynous union.
Right.
This is what she told me. But they had been trying for years, like women in and out, and nothing ever worked. And I'm thinking, just as a single woman, if in a monogamous situation, I'm
Right.
men in and out, something is wrong with me.
Something is wrong.
The common denominator here is me. It's not the men.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So with her and with them as a unit, they were the common denominator. All of these women
Mm-hmm.
going, something is wrong, and these women are not just going; they're running for their lives. They're
Mm-hmm.
hiding.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a situation where we got into an argument, it didn't work out. No, it was so.
So even if, I know we're trying to get to the downward spiral, but I like to try to understand in in the studying that she says she's an anthropologist by trade. I mean by study. Um, and the books that she read, want for your sister what you want for yourself, and
Right.
what is the next one? The Sacred Woman, and all
Yeah,
these things. Do you think
which
she was trying to emulate this perfect? No.
I think it was. Well, yes, you're right. I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish. You go ahead and finish that. I'm
No,
sorry.
I think was she putting this facade on them because the book says that I shouldn't be jealous. I will not be jealous. You know what I'm saying? Was she taking
But
to
I've
make
read these
herself
books.
look like the perfect candidate?
Yes, I've read both books. I have both books.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have them also. Yeah.
Patricia Dixon, I
right,
love her.
Dixon, right.
Queen of Four, love her. So when it came to living those principles and
Mm-hmm.
understanding, this lifestyle, I was fully prepared. When I got there, I realized that she was not. This
Mm.
is most certainly a facade. She, in fact, from one of the ex-wives that were on the show, told me that she
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know the book. She had them read it, and they read it, and she didn't. So when they would try to have conversations with her about the book, she couldn't speak to it.
Now, Amuna, does this sound familiar? One of two things. So I'm an anthropologist by trade. That's what most of my education and my discipline is. And I've read these books. It's very interesting to me that their books are often cited because I've read them. And in the book, there's a particular section, and it was what was attractive to me, was where she met with Israelites. And the discussion that they had is very often the second wife came in not knowing that there was an existing wife. And then once they were in the situation, they were like, well, I'm here. So now that I'm here, I'll make the most of it. There's some biblical principle that I keep being surrounded with. It must be true. And so, but there's a particular part, and you'll back me up since you read it as well, where the woman, one of the women, are faced with an opportunity to be alone with the husband because she's the second wife. This is not a rarity. So she finally gets to be alone with the man. And within not too much time, she is completely upset because she's the only person that has to tend to his needs. And she's like, I really rather read a book. Like, when is the first wife? When is the first wife coming back? She's like, when is she coming back? This is not what I signed up for. I don't want him 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
She realized that she missed having him periodically,
Yeah.
right? Part time, and
Mhm.
I think that's something we need to be honest about. And I like it when the women come on and they're honest about the fact that I don't want to be around this man all day long. I don't want to be a full time wife. You said earlier, um, one of the things that are attractive that we put in the benefit column is I have help,
Yes.
right? And the help is this other woman. I think that's an important takeaway here that you didn't. None of the women are really saying we have more masculine help. What we get is very heavy on feminine help.
Mhm.
I have more women around. I have more
Right.
sisters around.
Yep.
I'm getting child rear from these women, and all of the masculine help. He's in his office.
Yep.
So what he gets to do is, if you're having a problem, go talk to your sister. I don't have to deal with you,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And that's not that doesn't satisfy the part of the benefit box of I now have a man in my life.
Right. Right.
So
I
go
said
And
that
you
ahead.
start
part.
to very much miss out on that. I have a man in my life. I have a masculine presence for my children. What you've done is duplicate the feminine presence
Mhm.
on
To
your
that,
children, right? I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, no, thank you for that, Mariana. To that point, did you feel the overload of, like you said, he's in the office, most of it is on you guys, and that he is not really present as you thought he would be?
Yeah.
Let me say that. Did he live up to the expectation of I'm going to be present? Or were you like, bro, where you at?
He's in the
The first
office.
the first month he was present, but
Right,
after that it was bro, where you at? Because
right.
bro was in the office.
Bro was in the office. He
Bro
over
was
there
out of
talking about,
town. Like he out of town on business trips for a week at a time. And it's just me, her,
wow.
and the kids. And it's like at one point I would say this is my husband and my sister wife. And then after a while it's like, nah, this
This is
is
my
my
sister wife.
My sister, right?
Oh, wow.
I don't I don't know. He
I don't
stopped
know
by
what he,
every now and then.
wow. So, wow. Okay, and I know there's a missing element here, which is the children.
And we
Hmm.
want to
The
talk about
children, I'm okay. I'm watching. I have children, and I'm like, where are the children? So
Right.
at this time, as mothers, um, even if he's not, if you're like, bro, where are you for yourself? The children are having that same sentiment, like,
Yeah.
that. Right,
Daddy, where are you? Yes.
right.
So that thought of having a father for my children, when some women come into this space, it doesn't necessarily materialize in that way
Hmm.
because he has so many other things. Can you speak to that? How the promise oftentimes is you're going to have this male energy, and then it's not. Is that a disappointment? Do you share it amongst the sisters? Do you rationalize it away? What do you do with that?
Rationalize it and say, well, at least we have um, provision. We're being provided for.
Hmm.
The bills are being paid. So at this point, it is our responsibility and our duty as the wives to tend to the children and tend to the
Hmm.
home, tend to him. So you're looking at it from that perspective, you stop complaining and you just
Hmm.
start to accept, oh well,
This is
uh,
how it is.
yeah, this is how it is.
So
And
in a sense, he bought your submission.
pretty much, absolutely.
Not to, I mean, just not to put it in too harsher terms, but if we were to boil it down to its
Yeah.
basis, right? And it's not to say that that's something negative on the part of the women, but it shows a clear power play. Like, this is where the power rests. If I'm providing you with shelter, because remember the first thing he took away was your agency to provide yourself with shelter. So now you are dependent on this revenue source, and
Yeah.
he is the sole revenue source. So you
Yes.
are literally dependent. You're no more no more really involved in the running of the home than the children
Yes.
outside of your age. You are all equally dependent on this man, and pretty much the same way until we get to the sexual and affectionate component, which I'm sure we'll probably do later on in
Yes,
the.
yes, put a pause there. I don't mean to cut. Thank you for those who just joined us. The interview too sweet. I can't. The panel is what you guys see. I'm muffled. My
A
apologies.
little,
You guys can hear me well. The
Hear you.
audience is saying I'm kind of
a
muffled.
little. It's a little.
Y'all said I sound like I'm bathing in the tub. Y'all doing too much. Talking about a movie, you sound like you bathing.
Can I say something to
Yes,
what Anyana said?
yes.
Um, so when it came to the financial aspects, he paid, and I find out that he was borrowing money and swindling people and whatnot. But he
I don't
paid
have no
the
place
rent.
to throw myself down at. So if you see me do this, that's just me trying
It
to
was it
contain
was
it.
a mess. It was a mess. But he
In the
paid
world,
the house that we were staying in Georgia. He paid up the rent, I think, for like 6 months. So it was a lump sum of money he gave the landlord. So that was guaranteed. But what I found was that they were asking for money a lot. He wanted me to use my credit to get a car. He needed me to buy groceries or us going out as a family. I was funding that, and it was a situation where yes, he provided the roof,
right?
but there were still components of
The
me having to
amenities,
contribute. Yeah,
the
and once I
amenities,
didn't have any more money to contribute, then
right?
it's like, oh, he's complaining now.
So
Oh,
Hmm.
it was
I've
a
seen
grocery bill.
this thought of pooling the resources. Um, saying the man is supposed to be providing, but then he's pooling the resources from the feminine energy to provide. So it's
Yeah,
like, give me your stuff and then I'll give it back to you. You know what I mean? I'll give you an allowance. So you
yeah.
said that's what was happening.
Pretty much, yeah,
So
yeah.
in truth, at the time where they were seeking this sister wife, they weren't in necessarily a position to maintain the present and those that they were bringing in.
No, they weren't. When I initially came, they were in an apartment, a two-bedroom apartment, and they had just sold this old truck. It was a Explorer, I think, a Ford Explorer or
Mhm.
something like that. They sold it, and they were driving around in my car. So we had just one car, which was mine, and we ended up leaving that apartment and moving into the bigger house. As I stated, we moved in, and he paid up, did the rent or whatever. So the house was nice. It was really great. He got a lump sum of money. Later on, find out where from, but he got a lump sum of money, and he was able to refurnish. So a lot of the promises,
Mhm.
were coming to fruition in that regard. And so I started to feel a lot safer and a lot more comfortable. But then as we settled in, if I wanted to do things, if I wanted to, you know, um, travel, go out to eat with the
Go
children,
out, yes.
I would have to fund that myself because he couldn't give me the money for it.
So
Um,
at what point are you now in the house? Like some of these promises, at what point, how long in this process are you like, do you guys actually move?
oh, did we wait? You said when
To
during the
move, when you move to the bigger house now, the one
Oh,
that you
okay.
paid up.
This
Hmm.
was within the first 2 months that I was there.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. When we moved to the house, though, the big house, that's when things like really took a downturn. This is within the third, almost fourth month. We're settled in, and things just started to get very awkward and weird. I started to notice the jealousy. I started to see the sidebar conversations, the energy shifts in the
Right.
house. I was very sensitive to that. Um, the arguments, she and I started to argue about very petty
Wow.
things. She was very
Wow.
petty, and it didn't make sense. Some of the things, like she would tell me, oh, we have a difference in political views, and then he'd tell her, well, and he's like defending me at this point, which was something that happened, and then she stopped that quickly.
Wow.
But he was like, well, I have the same political views, so why are you telling her that that's an issue? So she was trying to find at this point little things
Little
to
thing.
say, okay, this isn't working, or
Hmm.
this isn't. And it's like, it was so petty. It's something that if I was in a monogamous relationship, I am not about to sweat my husband
Argue.
about his
Right.
political views. If you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, hey, whatever.
Is what it is. So,
You
so her jealousy, was there any jealousy over the man himself, or was she
yeah.
disconnected from? There was jealousy over the man.
One thing I've noticed was within the 2 months, he and I would be sexually active.
Hmm.
Come to find out, she didn't really want to have sex with him. I didn't know this. Okay, she didn't inform me of this. I learned this while being in the house and watching their dynamic and watching them interact. But I wanted to be with my husband sexually, and we
Hmm.
were, and she would be upset about it. The it was the what is it?
Hmm.
The frequency in the sex that made her mad. And I never forget, I'm in the kitchen. I actually grabbed the baby because they were still laying in the bed. I grabbed the baby out of the room. At the time, their son, he was still nursing.
Mm-hmm.
And I took him out, brought him in with the other kids, and I'm making breakfast. And she comes out of the room and she had to announce, I'm about to make love to my husband. And I'm like, okay, go ahead, girl. I got the kids. You go right ahead. So I'm, at this point, I'm encouraging it because I'm thinking like, if this is a healthy relationship, I want to encourage it remain healthy. So, because what I saw, and this is something that I was thinking too, is coming in as a sister wife, is the health and the success of my relationship with him depends on the success of the relationship with him. And as long as they're healthy and successful, I felt like I would be too. So anything that I can do to help contribute to the health and success of their relationship as a sister wife, I was willing to do. So
wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
No. I want you to finish that thought because it does circle back to something she said earlier. But I want her to finish the statement, and then I'll tell you why.
Okay. So yeah, anything that I can do. So if it was keeping the babies while you guys have a little more alone time in the mornings, cool. If it was, keeping the kids while y'all have a date night, great. I did not have an issue with it at all. And I didn't keep count of their sexual encounters, so it didn't matter to me. But apparently she was keeping count to some degree because it bothered her. And she felt the need to be passive aggressive about it. And it got to a point where, yeah, it was a lot of different things that happened. But
so this is clearly, I'm sorry, Mariana. I'm sorry, 1 second. This is clearly something she didn't want, but felt the need to say she wanted for whatever the reason. Is that what we're to understand? Because as we're saying, if they describe all of what they say they wanted very publicly, and they had it in you, then why did it all fall apart? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right, absolutely. And he would have a sidebar conversation with me every now and then. He'd tell me, this is the most that she's ever wanted to have sex with me. Like she's never wanted to have sex with me this much.
That's the competition component.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to, because I want us to go forward, but before we do, I think that there's something that's being highlighted in this statement, and that's when Ari says that she is pinning a lot of her future success with this relationship on their continued success, and that goes back to the original point of this woman's role as the recruiter. What made Ari feel disarmed was the fact that she appeared happy.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I want this happiness. If Ari has to have a moment where she says, you know what, they're not happy, then she has to rethink her entry, because her entry was based on their happiness.
Right.
She does not need to create a situation where they're not happy if she's basing her entry on their happiness. So when she says to us, I'm invested in them continuing to be happy because that's what brought me here.
Exactly.
Right. So I know that we're all hearing this, and it comes, and it's just like when we're reading something, it's important to stop and pause. And I like that Emuna does that a lot when she does noteworthy. She stops and pauses when there are key things we might otherwise miss. And I think that what you're saying here is super important, that you're saying that it was important to you that they were happy, and we should explore why their happiness was so important to you.
So you weren't trying to sabotage. You wasn't trying to throw sugar in the gas tank. You wasn't trying to make the food salty and blame it on her. I'm being silly, but you wasn't in here cutting up, Ari. Are you?
Right.
You wasn't in here.
No.
Okay.
I had coming in the purest of intentions, and I'm not lying. I'm being very, very honest.
Yeah, I'm messing with you. Because some people be like, nah, she lying. She came in there.
I
don't and not only that, a lot of women come in and say, I can replace the first wife. Right. That's why I'm saying it's important that we stop and hear Ari say that wasn't me. No, that's not what I came here for.
I didn't want to bring any stress to my children and to myself. And I know that's the thing, because I grew up with women. I have a whole bunch of women in my family. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. Right. I know what the contention looks like between women and the catty. I would never. I came into that situation thinking that they were successful. And that was one of the lures, is coming in and seeing how he treated her. I love the way he spoke to her. And I'm thinking, wow, this is, I would never come in and sabotage it. I wanted to come in and add to it. I wanted to be a part of it. So when
hearing him argue with her was a problem.
Yes, that was the old shit moment, because it's like, wait a minute, hold on, because if you're arguing with her,
you're going to do it to me.
It's a preview of what's going on down the line.
Exactly. And so that was definitely something that gave me pause and kind of made me leery. But I was very, I definitely stood up for myself. I definitely spoke for myself. And I found myself in the beginning defending her a lot and speaking for
Right.
her, because I just didn't want them to be arguing and him to be mad. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm very solution focused and oriented.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. It's
So
okay.
wait a minute.
You
Wait a minute. Hold on. So
have to be mad. We can figure this out.
99% of the time he ticky tacking away in the computer room, and you got space to still be there.
Right.
Like when you come out to get a drink and be mad and then go back in it. Like, when do you have time to be mad at anybody, bro?
Well,
We just got questions.
he did a lot of micromanaging us through text.
Mm.
We had a group text, a family text, and he would say, Ari, did you do this? Ash, did you do that? Did you do that? I still have the text messages. So it's like, yes, lunch is at 12. Where's lunch? You guys are late. Why are the kids still running around? Why aren't they napping?
What?
We were being managed through the phone. So we didn't have a husband there to say, oh, well, let me help or let me assist or what can I do or how was your day? No.
You
It's
sound like Charlie's Angels, just kind of get a message.
pretty much. So I found out, like, I couldn't even see how I would come in and sabotage it, because after a while I didn't even want.
So you didn't want it, right? You didn't want it. Okay, so you guys are getting your morning instruction. You know what I'm saying, dear team. You know what I mean? I need you. So you guys are doing this. Is there any pushback at that time? Or are you just saying, you know what, this is what it is. This is what I'm going to do.
That was me. It is what it is. I'm gonna fall in line.
Yeah.
I'm obedient. I'm gonna do, what my husband, because I'm following her lead too, and
Right.
she wasn't giving pushback. So I'm not about to be the one pushing
Right.
her.
The one who
I did stand up for myself, and there was pushback a few times, but not when it came to the responsibilities of the house. I never had an issue with cooking and cleaning and taking care of the children. I spent a lot of time with the kids. It was a situation where we had actually got an argument about or disagreement about the kitchen and who's cooking, because she always wanted to cook, and I'm like, sis, I can cook too. Like, it's okay.
So why do you think she always wants to be in control of the food?
Because she claimed that it was because of the baby having really bad allergies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy it. She used that kitchen time to get away from the children. She'd be in the kitchen for hours.
Like, I can't talk to you now. I'm peeling the mangoes.
Exactly. I mean, you're making like plant-based dishes, sis. It does not take you.
It don't take that long. What in the world is going on in there? Okay. So
she knew. What was it? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She can get away from them kids.
oh wow. Okay. I mean, I'm laughing. You know, the incident is kind of interesting. This is Ari telling her perspective of the situation. I'm trying to keep it light. That's what I do. I talk about serious things and keep it light, just so that we can, come from it from a place of healing and restoration. And to go through that, we have to go through the uncomfortable point. It doesn't mean that this person is the demon and this person is the angel. I mean, make of it what you will, but she's just giving, for those who may join us and join us after, she's giving her perspective, and we're listening and we're engaging. So, you have to run tell that. But as so you're in it, it doesn't sound like you're causing too much problems, and you get to a point. What is the point where you're like, you know what, I'm out? There's something that happens before that I'm out point. Was it a build up? What did that look like?
The build up was the amount of complaints from her and from him after a while. Like, Ari, you're sleeping in too long, or you're taking too long in the bathroom. Like, there were situations where I would wake up in the morning, and I am a woman who like to look nice around the house, right? So I wash my face, I pull my hair up or wrap my hair. That was too much. Brush my teeth. Like, this woman really wanted me to get up out of the bed and come straight to the kitchen and start cooking. When I did start cooking, she wanted me to get up and go straight down the stairs with the children. I couldn't. I'm thinking, she's like, well, I don't have to brush my teeth first thing in the morning. I'm like, what? Yes, you do. You need to. I brush mine. So I became defiant, and it pissed him off, because
they sound like they was treating you like you ain't had no green card.
Exactly.
Exactly. You didn't have no papers, Ari. You didn't have no papers.
It started to become more of a dictatorship than a marriage.
Wow. So you didn't have no me time, no prep time. just this is how I want you to show up, and this is how you need to show up.
She even wanted me to, because she was breastfeeding, she wanted me to stay up with her at night while she fed the baby. Like, she would be upset that I'm sleeping, which I'm supposed to be doing because I don't have any nursing babies. But she was upset that I'm sleeping because she, well, I'm not getting sleep. She shouldn't get sleep type situation. It was weird. It was very, very weird. The things that she would complain about. But the fact of the matter is she would go to him. It was always the complaints go to him and then he comes to me. Well, Ari, why aren't you? Well, Ari this and Ari that. And I'm like, and so the thing for me, okay, this is the end for me, was realizing that it didn't matter what I did. It was never good enough. It was never good enough. When she was sick, I brought her flowers, went to the store, got groceries, I cooked, took care of the children, cleaned. Nothing I did was good enough. Nothing. So I began to realize that this wasn't what they told me it was going to be. This wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And it got more and more volatile to the point where she and I got into a fight. Got into an argument that could have led to a fight. That resulted in her packing up the kids and going to Cincinnati. And so she left, just out of the blue, left. And he did not tell me what was going on. I just knew that she wasn't there at the house anymore. And that's when I went through his phone, because he wasn't telling me anything. She wasn't answering her phone or calls. And we had gotten into an argument, so I figured she was mad. But when I didn't see her or the kids in the house, I'm like, okay, two things.
Was it over the breast milk again?
Huh?
Was it over something? Was it over not brushing your teeth? What? Was it small, or was it something that warranted her packing up and leaving?
One of the incidents that happened was this toy car. It was $300 that he wanted, some Lego toy, Lego car. And he sent me a picture of it. It was a text between he and I. And he's like, oh, I want this car so bad, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I look on Amazon to see how much the car costs, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to buy the car. I still had money at this time. And he must have sent that text to her too. And then she texted me, she's like, Ari, he wants this car. We got to figure something out. And I told her, while I'm already looking for it on Amazon, I found it. I actually have it in my cart. I was just coming upstairs to get my wallet. So as I was coming upstairs, she was in the bedroom. And then she's like, well, why don't you just order it on our Amazon? I'm like, why? Because he'll see it. She was like, he won't see it. He doesn't check it. So then she puts it in the cart on their Amazon. And we still use my card. So I went ahead and bought it. And she expected me to say that it was from both of us. And I intended to do that. But I had completely forgot I got the damn car. So when the car came a couple of days later, it was a surprise to me too.
Right.
Like,
you forget to order stuff.
He was genuinely surprised. He was excited. And then she was like, oh, I don't know. And then because I'm already dealing with a lot in the house at this point, my mind was not even there. And so when she said, oh, I don't know, Ari, do you know? And I'm like, I think I did. That's exactly how that happened. And she was upset about it. She was mad. And then I had to tell him, like, oh, we both bought the car, but she was pissed. And she held that against me. And believe it or not, the other women that have been sister wives after,
they heard about the car.
No, they told me about the car. They was like, that woman did not let that go. And I was like, are you serious?
But wait a minute. No, but you know what? It sounds funny. It does. But honestly, if we go back and we look at what the entries and the benefit column again, both women are looking for sisterhood. Ari is saying these are her check boxes. Now, the first wife had check boxes too. And she may have felt like Ari wasn't checking her boxes.
Yeah.
She was already being neglected by her husband. She's looking for an ally. And instead of an ally, she's starting to conceive of Ari as competition.
Yes.
And once she starts to switch her lens, her check boxes are not being checked anymore. So she now has to go into competitive mode with this woman she wanted to have an ally in. And that has to have some kind of effect on her psychologically as well. So she starts to treat Ari differently. She starts to perceive everything Ari does differently. And so it makes sense. Now, because Ari is our guest, obviously we have a bias towards her only because of information. But if we try to step back and see what both women have shared with us, then not to say that what she did to Ari was correct, but there's space to understand how this happens. Because the idea here is to understand the dynamic and not to scandalize it, right?
Right.
I don't believe that's Ari's intention either. And because and as women, we're looking at this component of feminine energy and what we're looking for. And what we're trying, because the fact is, as much as we keep talking about polygyny, all of the women are monogamous. They have one man.
Yes.
He's polygynous.
Yes.
None of you women are polygynous.
Yeah.
All of these women who are talking about polygyny, and I'm in this polygyny, you are not.
One
You,
way monogamy.
you are in monogamy. You have not escaped monogamy. You haven't. That idea of, oh, let's try some alternative. You have no alternative.
Mm-hmm.
You are still in monogamy. I think we need to be honest about what the women are really getting out of this. So the only thing that I can really come on board with you or with women on this particular subject is when you tell me you're looking for sisterhood, because it's really all you're getting out of it. You
Yeah.
have a monogamous relationship and you have sisterhood. So when we start to talk about the complexities of the female relationships inside of this dynamic, it's important to look at why jealousy occurs, why this idea of competition occurs, because it's not so much about this man, because they already have that's not changing. It's not, I've invited this woman into the relationship and I feel betrayed by her.
Yeah.
So we need to really kind of
But
tease that out also.
to that sister Mayana, I'm trying to figure out, or maybe it's my mind. A, how does he put his desire of this car on the women who have been disempowered
Right.
from getting outside resources? Like, what type of expectation is that? Why are you showing me? I should be showing you stuff. Like, look, I've been seeing this. So
Yeah.
that's number one, red flag for me. Why are you showing me, bro? I'm at home. You know what I mean? That expectation that he had and that she has, they really wanted to show it to Ali, but he just put it in the group chat.
Correct.
Exactly.
So
Correct.
it
Exactly.
don't
He's
look so
feeding
bad.
this competition because he knows the financial capability of Ashley, and he
Right.
knows the financial. So in certain ways, he is
He
feeding
was slick with
this
that.
competition. I mean, I'm glad that you brought, because yes, we're seeing how the men are very often complicit in a lot of this back
Absolutely.
and forth between the women. He knows when he's being affectionate to you and how that's affecting her.
Mhm.
We hear him go, "This is the most she's ever won." Listen, he understands and is thriving off of the competition between these two women because
Yes.
he is benefiting in so many ways. He's benefiting sexually from
Mm-hmm.
the fact that now this other woman is here and she's spiking up the desire. If even if the desire is competitive, it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with him. It's just
Right.
again about these two women. It's not about him. I'm doing this not for him, but for Ari. I want Ari to see me do this. I want
Mm.
Ari to know she's not beating me at
Exactly.
this.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
You
And I
hitting
want
the nail on the head.
She over there with the
You're
hammer
hitting it on the head.
like,
Like every
I-
time.
I'm, we've
That's
got 20
exactly
years of this. We've been studying this for a very long time. We've
very
been thinking
long
this
time.
for a very long time. So when we say that we come to these conversations with the most, sincere of intentions in the academic spaces, it's because we don't have any personal investment in this. This is all about the people. We have a lot invested in sisterhood, and so and marriage strategies have to do with what we feel necessary in the moment. These are marriage strategies. So like I like that in the beginning we talked about the difference between it being secularly motivated, spiritually motivated, and religiously motivated, and the fact that it has all of these seats and entry points. But at the end of the day, a lot of the conversation has to do with the women, and it's really unfortunate that the narrative is so propelled by the men, because a lot of this, as we talk about it and tease it out, has very little to do with them.
Yeah.
A lot of this is dependent on, number one, whether or not the women are going to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, how the women interact with each other, what they're accepting or expecting
Mm-hmm.
from each other. And so the voices of the women are the most important voices here because, again, they are still monogamous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times I need to say that.
But see that, Sister Mariana, just as I know a little, been following the story concerning the sisterhood, Ari. I know you don't have to go like all the way in there, but in this particular case, in your case, your sister, ex-sister wife wanted more, according to what you said. She wanted more than hugs and Kleenex. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So, man,
You don't got to
I,
go all the way in there, but you can still do your thing.
I,
I'm
I,
gonna.
I made it very clear coming into that relationship that I was not bisexual.
Right.
Oh yeah, let's get into that part. There was a sister that has a question here, but I want to hear about this part.
Yeah, we're gonna come to the questions and comments in a little bit. Go ahead, sister.
Yeah, I made it very clear. And not that I have anything against bisexual women or men. I do not. That is your life. You do what you do. It just wasn't something that I was into to no degree. And I had made that very clear. When I courted them years ago, they brought that up as something that may have been something they wanted. And even then I stood firm on what I knew and what I believed. So then fast forward, I'm in the situation. And again, I am not trying to be intimate with this woman. But there were one instance where she and I went out dancing. And this was around the time like the spa, I'm getting him to let us go out more often, right? And so we go out and we're dancing and she's dancing with me, but I feel the sexual energy from her, like a flirtatious type energy.
Right.
But at the time I was drinking, so I wasn't really reading much into it because I'm thinking maybe I'm tripping. But then when we get home in the home dynamic, I'm bent over on the counter and she comes behind me and she slaps my ass with both hands, like cup my booty. And I'm like, whoa. During the times that we because he demanded that we all slept together in the same bed. He's on one end, I'm on the other. Yes.
Look at Mariana's face.
Sorry. He's in the middle. I'm sorry. He's in the middle. She's on one end, I'm on the other. This was his demand. Okay.
This is not even a flag. This is a flare gun. This is not even a flag.
I didn't have my own
shot.
I didn't
Oh,
have
absolutely not.
I didn't have my own privacy. We shared a space. And when he and her would get it on, I'm right there.
Yo, Ari, I need another drink of water. I'm sorry, I'm almost out of interview mode. Hold on, let me get
He would say,
about to go into council mode. Like, sis.
The way that he presented that was, I need to have my wives in the same space and I need to feel the flesh, your skin, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay. So as long as I'm on this side, then, and she's on that.
And what did she say when he was presenting
she didn't say anything? She was fine. She was fine with this.
It wasn't wow.
This is something they did this before, so it wasn't uncommon for her. But the whole him wanting us to have a threesome comes in when they were active, and he wanted me to hold her hand during the act.
What in all of Handmaid's Tales is going on right now? I'm sorry, but did you guys see that show, Handmaid's Tale, when the wife holding the hand?
Yes.
What in all of Handmaid's Tale of Joesph?
Wanted me to hold her hand, like, because he wanted me to do something else to her. But I'm like, nah. So he's like, well, just hold her hand. I'm like, okay. So I'm holding her hand and I'm just kind of sitting there and the shit was real awkward. And I'm like, oh my God. So
that is awkward. Yo, I'm sorry.
It was always awkward. He wanted me to rub her arm, rub her breast, rub her leg, just participate in some form of fashion. And she didn't seem to be offended by it. She seemed to welcome it. And toward the end of it, she tells me she felt like she wanted me to want her the way I wanted him.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did she feel offended by your lack of participation? Since she doesn't.
Yes. She wanted me to want her the way I wanted him. And I told her, I can't want you the way I want him because he's a man. And so, I see you as my sister and I just simply could not see me being sexual with her. I just couldn't. And then on top of that, her attitude, toward the end of the situation was just really shitty. So I didn't want to, it wasn't attractive to me at all.
But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like, because the question earlier was, how does this woman feel betrayed by you? Because one of the women are asking, like, for me to make sense of that statement. And I see here, it sounds like she wanted you to be for them and not for him. And when you were for him, in more ways that were beneficial for her, that's where the sense of betrayal comes.
You got it. And another thing that struck me as odd is that she would introduce me to her friends, like the acting people that she knew, because she was trying to be an actor. I was already established actor, and that's how we reconnected. Is that she was asked me questions about my agent and how I, did this and this. So when she would introduce me, as her wife. This is my wife, Ari. Mm-hmm. So that let me know that she came in, or they had me come into the situation as somebody they would share in more ways than one.
That is This is telling for those who have joined us, this is not just an isolated situation. Oftentimes, we're talking about the way something is packaged, the way what it holds inside, the after effects, how people. So far, Ari says, for those who have joined, just a little recap. She's been having this conversation back and forth with them some years. She actually buys in. She goes to the home. He encourages her to sell all her stuff. So she's here. She's invested and she's here.
Mhm.
And all of this stuff is beginning to unfold right before her eyes. And at this time, is your child is there too as well.
Yes, yes.
And
Initially,
now children are in the home.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just letting them know. And now the children are in the
The
home as
answer.
well.
Mhm.
Watching this.
No, no, no. They didn't sleep, or
No, not
they
watching
saw
you
us.
having sex. I'm saying watching
Yeah,
the family dynamic.
yes,
Because
they,
they're part of the family dynamic. They know they
yes,
have two maternal caregivers. They know there's a maternal caregiver somehow. He's watching. They're watching how this man interacts with the adult females in the
Right.
relationship. So they're seeing these things in a very formative stage of their lives
Right.
about what family looks like and how it works. So that's what
yes.
I meant by they're watching. I didn't expect for you to have
Mhm.
them in that space. I'm
Yeah,
sorry I wasn't clear in
you're
that
fine.
way.
You're fine.
Oh,
They saw us, and I had to explain to my older daughters when they came, because they didn't come with me initially. It was my fourth
Mm.
that I took with me initially. It was a few months later that they came because they were with their father. And a few months later, when they came in and they realized that I was sleeping in the room with them, like we were all sleeping together, I had to explain to them, and it was really
Mm.
hard to explain because it's kind of,
mm.
Mama, why you in the
Yeah,
room?
I can imagine.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
I said, well, this is, his requirement for us as wives is he wants us all to sleep together. And, mommy's on one side and Mama Ash is on the other side. And she's like, oh, okay. And it's, children, they don't really have a whole
At
lot of
first,
say
yeah, they
in these
don't have that
things.
filter,
So
right?
they accept and they're like, oh, okay.
Right.
It's still kind of weird to them, but it's like, oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
In addition to that, we're gonna. So he had the sleeping requirement, and he had the nudity requirement as well.
did. He did. When I
And,
was standing over the counter, I was nude in the kitchen. And she comes and slaps that's why she slapped my ass, because I was nude. But he had a requirement that she and me are nude. Now I
All the
protest
time.
all the time. I protested, that we wouldn't be nude around the kids, but
right.
he gives me this thing of, well, one of the reasons why I want to have my own kids with you is that I want to be able to, for us to be ourselves, to be natural around our children. And nudity shouldn't be something, this is what he said, nudity shouldn't be something that is seen as a taboo. It should be something that is accepted. It should be something that is not seen as something shameful. I don't want my daughters and my son to be shamed about their bodies. This is the logic behind it, what he presented to me. And then she was on board with it. In fact, there's still an article up on her blog where she explains why she parents in the nude.
How do you
So,
feel about that? How do
um,
you feel about that? Now, how were you enticed to feel? But when you heard this, did that set off anything for you?
um, yes. Initially, before I came into the house, when we spoke of being nude, because I would be nude around my daughters, but they're my daughters, and mostly because I'm breastfeeding the baby, so I'll breastfeed her after the shower or something like that. I didn't have an issue, but having other women nude around the kids and
Right.
having anybody else nude around the children wasn't necessarily my jam. And I
Right.
told him that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
he's like, well, I'll agree to wear shorts or something. When I got to the house, I told him this, that I wasn't
Right.
comfortable with that idea, so he wouldn't be nude around the kids.
So
Um, and
But
he
so,
started,
so now we're hearing you compromising more spaces where you're saying this doesn't feel right, this doesn't sound right, and you having to rationalize away your own sense of morality, your own sense of this is not okay. But in order for me to make this work, I'm going to put
Right.
away my internal signal to say this doesn't feel right. So you have to continuously silence yourself in order for you to fit into this family. And when this woman feels like you're no longer a good fit, that's when you have to face the fact that your fitness is a big issue. And you're
yeah,
the only one compromising, it sounds
yes,
like.
because I felt like I was taking my cue from her too. And I'm thinking, well, if, she's comfortable with me being naked around the kids, then, and their core philosophies around nudity, it's okay. Yeah, okay.
Right.
I guess I can be nude. It's okay. And my daughters, my teens weren't nude.
Okay.
They were not. They were fully covered, and I
Yeah,
made
I was
sure.
going to say, I'm over here like waiting. Like, so do you think it was more of a control issue, like behind all of the, hippie dust? Was it really a level of, I want to see how far I can push? Because
Yes.
sometimes when people, right, I want to see how much of your boundary I can transgress, how
Yep.
much I can control you.
Yep. I believe that, and because they pushed a lot of boundaries. One of the boundaries that he tried to push that I fought back was changing the children's last name.
Hmm.
He
Mm.
demanded that I change my children's last name. Mind you, I was married previously. My children carry their father's name, and I was
Mm.
to take that away from him. Even if things didn't work out with he and I, he was still an amazing father.
Right.
Mm.
Oh, I was not about to take that from him by changing the name. And I'm like, no, I can change my name, but I'm not about to change my kid's name. And he was upset about that. And then he tells me, well, this is a Snowden creed. And all of my children, I want all of my children, even my stepchildren, because I don't see them as stepchildren. They're mine. And I want them to have my last name. And, he hit me with a lot of this
Did he
stuff.
say please? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Certain words, maybe I declare. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I just saw it over my mind. My apologies.
Yeah.
This
So,
was the,
so he
um,
declares now that he has all of this. So why didn't he roll out all of these declarations before so somebody knows what they're signing up for? Like, did
that,
he declare that before, or is it
he
like
did
now
not,
that they're here?
no. Mm-mm.
Mm.
Before. Even with the he wanted me to become a licensed gun owner or apply for the license to possess a gun because I didn't know and he didn't tell me until I got in the house that he's a convicted felon.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't supposed to have guns. So it was so many things that he was trying to push on me. He wanted me to change my last name, the children's last name. He wanted me to basically kind of just throw the kids' fathers out of the picture, to be honest. And he caused a lot of strife between me and the father. A
Right.
lot of strife that was unnecessary. He
Unnecessary.
wanted me to become the gun owner or whatever, get the what is it, the license to carry. Shoot, that's it. He wanted
Yeah.
me to get the license to carry so that I can have handguns as well or whatever in the state of Georgia. So he was doing a lot. And it was a lot
A
a
lot
lot
of
around his control and his need to have things a certain way. He wanted things to look a certain way, even when it came to us being naked, even when it came to us sleeping in the same bed, what we ate, how we looked. He had all of this down to a science. And yes, it was very, very, very controlling. Um, but here I am thinking this is what leadership looks like.
Mm.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
I'm glad you get there. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm thinking, okay, well, he's taking initiative, or he's being in control. This is what a man's supposed to
A
do.
man is supposed to do. You know
Um,
what? I want to ask you quickly. I don't want you to just train the thought, but I do want to ask you to go back to this point of nudity. In hindsight, or maybe even in the middle of it, did you feel like there was a component of building your vulnerability? A lot of people feel vulnerable while naked, which is why, like, if somebody comes and you're in the shower, you're like, oh my God, you have to go in and get dressed quickly. So, do you think that there was some part of that idea of keeping the two of you
But
vulnerable
right.
by
mhm.
keeping you naked, like
Yeah,
literally exposed and at
yeah.
his disposal? Do you think, even if you didn't think it then, in hindsight, do you think that's a component in
Absolutely.
that?
I'll tell you that's beautiful and brilliant that you brought that up because one instance where I was naked and Ashley, she and I were having a disagreement, and he jumps in and he's on her side, and I'm
Mm.
pissed at this point because I'm like, why are you even getting in? This is between she and I. Let us work this out. And he's like, well, you're being unreasonable and blah blah blah. So we're going back and forth, and I felt the need to cover up. I grabbed the towel and I wrapped it around
Mm.
because I no longer felt safe. And it
Mm.
happened more than once. We're naked and we're having a disagreement, me, him, and her. And I go grab something and I put it around
To
me.
cover up.
I don't trust y'all, and I'm starting to
Mm.
feel like I'm being I'm being singled out. And I even noticed that when they were arguing with me, they were happiest. Like it was more
Mm.
the time that they were the closest and happiest is when it was only when I was the enemy. If
Mm.
that makes sense. If I was the one that they were after.
Because
So
now they have something in common. They have been
yes,
so long at odds with each other, you become the common thing.
yes. And I
That
started
is.
again. I actually started wearing like a little slip, that kind of thing. This is toward the end, before things ended. Because I just he started to lose control of me, and he saw it.
Mm.
Mm.
I started to see what I didn't see in the beginning. And so now I'm regaining my independence. Now I'm, I was getting a stream of income coming in. I didn't tell him. I started
I'm
to,
sorry.
yeah, I started to, I didn't say anything. Because I was an actor at the time, so I would get residual checks and stuff.
Residuals, yeah.
He knew they were coming in, but I wouldn't tell him how much the checks were. I would just deposit it and not say anything. And I started to, just kind of plan. I was planning my exit before the whole situation happened where I had to leave. I wasn't ready to leave when they put me out of the house, but I was prepared mentally, but preparing myself, I'm going to have to leave this thing because these people are crazy. So yeah, when it came to not feeling safe, you hit the nail on the head yet again. I didn't. And I firmly believe that it was about vulnerability and making us feel vulnerable the entire time we were there, because it was about control. This man is a genius at how he controls women. He doesn't do it in a way that you feel as though you're being controlled. He do it in a way that you feel as though you're being protected and cared for from a man's perspective. Or this is what a proper husband is supposed to do for a proper wife. And the submission, he wanted us to just acquiesce to everything. And as long as you're acquiescing to whatever he wants you to do, you're a great wife. You get rewarded. It was almost like the reward system, punishment and reward. Oh, you want to be defiant? You don't want to do this? Well, I'm not going to talk. We're going to single you out or whatever. And so whenever I would protest to something, I would be demonized for it.
So at this time, there's no one coming over, no friends, no family, no one checking in on you guys. Are you just in this space with no outlet except for them?
I didn't have family in Atlanta, in Georgia.
Were you able to still talk to your parents, or were you not talking with them?
I talked. I didn't talk often because I, started to feel ashamed and stupid because they were right. And, I'm seeing more and more every day that they were right. So it was becoming very hard to even talk. Like I would talk to my mom, but I couldn't tell her what was happening.
And that's another component why I want to speak about the isolation, the shame, the guilt. That people say, well, why did you stay? And why didn't you run? And they're not realizing that emotionally and psychologically, somebody put in the chat, they groomed you. Yeah, so by the time you realize that you've been groomed, you're kind of like,
you're
who
invested.
am I going to talk to?
You're invested. Good word. Yeah. And run where? You sold everything. Run where?
Yeah. Well, where was I going to go? To who? When? Right. How?
Right.
Like, even with the money I had, that was enough for me to buy food and, the money I was saving, that was toward the end that I actually started getting that income, Right. So before then, I was drained. I didn't have any more money. So when I did start getting the money coming in, this was like the 8th month. So the 9th month was when she left, and then I left shortly after. So I he helped me move, like he helped me get out of the house, so to speak, because she wanted me gone. He wanted me to stay. So what he would tell me is, you can stay as long as you need to. Now he knew I couldn't stay like forever because she didn't want me there. And this is me seeing texts between the two of them. He would tell her things like, well, she's taking forever to leave, and I've told her to leave and she doesn't want to leave. But then he come on the other end and say, well, you can stay as long as you need to,
to playing both sides.
Yes.
But remember, they have I think this is an interesting thing that we see developing here is they have a group text and then he has side checks with the two. So there's a face that he presents to the two of them while simultaneously giving them both. That's right. Correct. Yep. Correct. Which only continues to create a tension between the two women, because there's a single narrative and then there are separate narratives. Absolutely. And so he is very, very, very actively creating this tension between the women. So a lot of the time when they talk about jealousy between women, they make it sound like it happens just between the women, that they are the ones that are having this problem. The man is the innocent victim of this cattiness that is innate in women, and it's that women are not coming from some place. It's just that they're all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It's just the nature of womanhood. But we can see here that he is trying to create a relationship on the side with Ari. He has a relationship on the side with Ashley, and then in the middle, he's making it seem like they're a team.
Yep.
When in fact he has separate teams. They have totally separate ball clubs, and then they are not on the same team. And this type of fractured communication immediately precludes any hope for there being cohesiveness, because he's already created this type of competitive environment for the women.
Absolutely.
This is true. This is
Absolutely.
so
It was
when
a
she
situation.
leaves, is that her leaving to try to compel you to leave?
Hmm.
Is she trying to force your hand? Like, I'll leave her in there and then she'll run away?
Yeah,
Something?
she was forcing his hand to put
Yes.
me out
Okay.
because he didn't want to put me out. See, she wanted me to go and he didn't want me to go. So he would try to reason and use logic with her, like, Ash, this is really petty. You're
And
differentiating
she's
with our
saying choose.
right. And she's like, well, I'm leaving. So she
Hmm.
leaves and she tells him, I'm not leaving until she's gone. I'm not coming
You're
back
not
until
coming back until she's gone. That's what I figured.
Did
Yeah.
she
right.
take their children with her?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And she knew how to
That's
use
right.
the children to shift power in the relationship. And so I remember when she was gone, I'm in the kitchen cooking and he's in his office in the basement and I hear him screaming at the top of his lungs. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? He's yelling, you stupid bitch, bring my kids back. And I'm like,
Mm.
so I go downstairs and I'm like peeking, listening in outside the
I
Mhm.
can hear
door.
it, Ari, right now. Like, what's going on in
Yeah,
here?
I was shocked because I was like, who is this man yelling and screaming at? And
Right.
it was her. And he's like,
Mhm.
bring my effing kids back, and you can't do this. I knew you were gonna try to take my children and blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh my god. And it was her keeping the kids from him and probably
Mhm.
threatening him to not bring them back because she wanted me gone.
So they pursue you for 4 years, get you in the house, control the whole narrative. And like Mayana says, when you no longer fit in the box, she wants to expel you. And this is something I want to bring to light, that it is a destabilizing position to be in
Yeah.
when you have no legal recourse. Your family told you not to do it, right?
Right.
You don't have any finances, and now the woman decides, I'll be changing my mind. It's
Hmm.
time
Right.
for you to go.
Yep.
It's
You
not
want
fun
to go,
anymore.
throw you out with Ishmael. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we have to also look at on the back end of this conversation, is that a lot of women don't want to come forward and talk. Again, thank you so much for sharing,
No problem.
because it's embarrassing. It's all of these things that, how did I allow myself to get in that
Right.
position? Right? But it's real and present. And some women, they go on to someone else. And then the
Hmm.
Mm.
same thing happens there. And then the same thing happens there. So some don't even have a safety net to get themselves back in alignment. They just keep rolling down the road.
Yep.
Right.
True. And for me, talking and speaking out about it does two things. It helps to continue my healing process because
Right.
healing isn't linear and it takes years
Correct.
to heal from
Correct.
things like this. And two, to protect other women from not being victimized by these people. Because of course, in this interview, I'm not going into detail of what happened. There's
Right,
a
right.
lot of crazy, tragic things that happened, but I just wanted to protect other women and children from this type of traumatization, this type of, abuse. If what I'm saying, if me coming out and putting myself out there in the world for ridicule, judgment, whatever, if that means that I'm saving lives, so be it.
Let it be. And that's
And
it.
we
That's
appreciate that. I mean, I want to make sure that there's a moment to respect that, because
right.
vulnerability is something that will dissuade people from coming out. The opinions of others, because we're on a very public forum right now. This is not a chat room on Facebook. This is YouTube, and there's a number of people that can come on, and you are not an unknown person.
Mhm.
So there's a great deal of bravery, and we really, really need to take a moment to appreciate that you have once again put a lot on the line for someone else.
Yes.
And so I want that to be acknowledged. I know there are a lot of people who from the outside can say you were not intelligent in the things that you did. You don't have any self-esteem. And although we're listening to you, you're very intelligent and you are very well composed. And you are sharing from my perspective, I've heard people be more biased, but you're not. You're saying this is my part in this.
Right. This is
I
what I
accept.
did. This is what they did. Right.
Right. This is my part in
Yes.
this. This is
I
what
must
I listened to and accepted, even against my own better counsel.
Yes.
and then say, well, this is what the other person did to me. You have the right to say someone did something to you. You have the right to say this man misled me. But it's incredibly admirable for you to say, I didn't have to make those choices. It's incredibly admirable for you to say, this is where I went wrong here. And maybe I say longer than I should because I did see things and I talked myself out of it. That's an
Mm-hmm.
important thing to say. It's very important that you're articulating those things because women are going through that right now. They are hearing things in their head and they're allowing themselves with their own voices to talk themselves out of things. No one outside of them is convincing them. They're
Yeah.
saying, I see this, but I
But
have, like you said, I have an investment in making
but
this work. So
Mhm.
let me talk myself out of it. Those are very, very important messages. And I have a great deal of respect for you for giving that to the people. The people need to be honest about
Absolutely.
receiving these signals.
Absolutely.
So
And
thank you for
another
that.
thing to add, um, I wasn't completely in the situation where I couldn't see things. The red flags that I did see, as I continued to see them, I started to do two things. I started to screenshot everything.
Mm,
Conversations between him, her, me, her. When I went through his phone, I screenshotted all of it, sent it to my phone. I started taking pictures of documents,
mm.
all of these things, because at this point, I'm no longer feeling safe. At
yes,
this point, something is wrong and I don't know what to do. So I know that in court, if it ever came to it, it's not what you say, it's what you can prove.
it's what you can prove.
And that I think I want to I know I'm cutting off. I apologize for that, but I think that this is important because it comes to the point where you feel like, will they believe me?
Yes.
Right? I made such a big noise about doing this thing. Will they believe me? Am I crazy? Because you start to get into a relationship, and part of the manipulation process is making the victim feel like they're crazy
Yep.
and gaslighting you. I'm
Yes.
not the problem. You're the problem. That didn't happen. You're exaggerating. You're just being emotional. And there comes a point where you're like, am I the one that's being emotional? They seem fine. Maybe I am crazy.
Right.
They've
Right.
been doing it. Maybe I'm westernized. Maybe I'm not spiritual enough.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yes,
I'm the problem, right?
Hmm.
And then you stay. And then you're saying, you know what? When you start to feel like, I'm not the problem, but will they believe me? Because part of you doesn't believe you.
Yeah.
So some of that is, I need to make this real. So I'm
Hmm.
going to screenshot it. Now it's real. It's not
Yep.
just in my head anymore. It's on the phone. There are
Yes.
documents now. It's not something that you don't have to believe me. It's tangible. It's physical. It's real. I'm not crazy. I think
Yes.
some of this motion of taking screenshots is you saying and declaring to the world, I'm not crazy. This is happening to me. Right?
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, people wouldn't have believed me had I not had screenshots.
yes,
Like to this day, I did an interview with John Yates on YouTube, and had I not given him screenshots, people would have torn me apart because I don't know why we live in a culture where they don't believe victims. And so when a person comes out, the reason why they're so afraid and they keep things in and they don't come out right away is because of the fear of shame and being
Mm,
rejected and being told you're lying. So those screenshots that I took has saved me in so many
mm,
ways because now I can speak out and say this is what happened and I can show people this is what happens. You
right,
know.
right.
So yeah, taking those screenshots for me was definitely making it real in my head
right.
because he did get into my head. He did. He was in my head. And I
Mm,
did start to believe, which is why I stayed as long as I did, is I started to believe that something was wrong with me. I started to believe that I
Okay.
wasn't the best sister wife. I wasn't a good
mm,
wife. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? What and I even have a text message, me asking him, like, what is it that I need to do?
mm,
What is it I need to do to be better? Tell me and I'll do it.
I think this is important. And for those who just joined us, let me just introduce myself. My name is Amuna Yisrael. When we have community conversations, we welcome everyone to share their thoughts and opinions. But I do ask that to be respectful. If you're not respectful and you cannot expect respect to the extend respect to the panel, you can kind of keep it to yourself. So I'm just going to give that one warning as we're having this discussion. We always keep it respectful to one another. Now, concerning what we're talking about and what Ari is sharing, if you don't understand manipulation, if you don't understand gaslighting, if you don't understand narcissism, then you're not going to understand the value of this conversation. And that's okay. But just stick a pin and continue to listen. Because just because you may not have been exposed to type of personalities and characters like that doesn't mean it's not real. And doesn't mean that the most brightest, intelligent person cannot fall vulnerable or prey to when somebody starts to get into your mind. So I just wanted to say that I have to get really serious because one thing I don't tolerate and don't like is disrespect. So please, let's keep it clean as we continue this conversation. I'm sorry to cut you, but you can go ahead now.
No, you're fine.
Ari, before you continue, the other thing I want us to be aware of is abuse does not have to be physical. Abuse is about power and control.
Right.
And the things that we hear repeated in this conversation so far is that there is an emphasis on power and control. What this panelist is sharing with us is an experience of abuse. And as women, a lot of the people that are tuning in now are women. And very often we hear, well, at least he didn't hit you. And we need to really, really let go of that because domestic violence, intimate partner violence, has to do with power and control. And the idea here, one of the things we opened with is that she had to relinquish power and control from the beginning. In order for her to be considered a fit, she had to get rid of all of the things that would have lent to power, agency, and control by not having a place to go, by not having any revenue sources, by not having any of her support systems. She had no power and she had no control. And once again, she was a child. She was not. I need you to understand this. You just, and maybe you need to hear it also, is that these were not. You were not a woman in that relationship. You were a child. You were another child in that relationship. So it's very hard to exert any power, very hard to exert any control when you don't have any of those things. You had about as much say in that relationship as any of your children.
Yes.
The only thing you got to do was sexually please him and apparently her if you had been so inclined. But
Right.
you didn't have but you did not have the role of a woman in that relationship.
No, I did not. And I actually have a text message stating that I didn't have equal footing in that relationship. Another thing too, he did physically abuse me. I was
I'm so sorry to hear that.
physically attacked, and it was also sexual abuse. There was an instance. I didn't want to get into the details because I know we didn't want to make the broadcast heavy because it
Right,
can
right.
be. My story is very, very heavy. But yeah, there was physical abuse as well, but it started off as psychological, mental,
And it
emotional,
does. And it does.
and it graduated into the physical. After the physical, I was out of there. I was gone. You have to tell me twice. I was gone.
If you don't, you obviously we appreciate you being vulnerable enough to say that to us. If you don't want to talk about it here, I want you to know that it's a safe space because we're all obviously very empathetic to you, but you do not have to go any further with this conversation here. I happen to be a domestic violence advocate against intimate partner domestic violence, and so I'm very sensitive to certain language. I don't mean to pull that out of you, but I don't want it to be missed.
Hmm.
I don't want people to just say or walk away say she's sensationalizing, she's capitalizing, because we're not speaking to someone who has anything to gain from this conversation. You were a victim or survivor of the situation, and that needs to be heard, that needs to be said. There were abuses, even if it wasn't physical. And I'm so sorry to hear that it was. But if only for other women to be able to say, okay, so maybe I am also in an abusive relationship because, again, the narrative is often if you're not being hit, you're not being abused.
Right.
And I just, that needs to be heard. I think that that's a very hurtful narrative, and we really have to let go of it. We have to let go of
I,
it if we have any hope of healing and moving forward as a family.
I agree. I absolutely agree. That is definitely something I've heard is that if you're not being hit, well, at least it doesn't hit you. And this is a justification for women who stay in relationships that are, or they're dealing with narcissistic abuse. They're dealing with
Correct.
control.
Yeah.
They stay and say, hey, he didn't, well, at least he didn't hit me, but
Right.
he's stopping you from growing. You are his child. You're not his equal, and that's not healthy. That's not
Mm-hmm.
healthy for you or the children involved. So for me, I'll say this, me telling my story is, I'm definitely not sensationalizing it.
Right.
Oh, I don't have a reason to do so. I don't have any monetary gain that I get from this at all. I haven't been paid by anybody to say anything or do anything. This is on my own merit. And yes, I do have a public identity. I've been seeing, I'm an actor. So I'm literally putting my identity, my brand on the line, so to speak, out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a worthy cause for me. So I'm not seeing it as me compromising and it's not paying off. It will pay off. At least
It will
somebody
pay.
will be
It will
safe,
pay off.
protected from these people. And even to your point, Mariana, when it comes to women listening, somebody might be in a relationship just like this right now.
Yeah.
And they're listening to me. And they didn't realize that they were being abused.
Yeah.
They had kept being gaslit. Somebody
Yeah.
keeps saying, well, you're exaggerating. It's not really happening. But then they're listening to me and they're putting things together and they're thinking, yes, this is not a healthy relationship. So if they can hear me and they now make the realization that they're in something, now they can start to get out of it or start to make the moves to get out, you know?
And let's speak to that, because some people who may not have been in a situation, or who is still in a situation, make it so simple. Why don't you just leave? You know what I mean? Like running off like Harriet Tubman in the bush. Like, speak about, like you said, you began to make these plans and started to incrementally, intellectually see your way out before you physically made it. How did that look for you?
Yes. First, so it was a situation of me not realizing that I was in an abusive relationship, me thinking that's me. But then spirituality was what, like meditation. I would meditate. I would talk to my ancestors, talk to the universe. You know, I'm trying to center myself at this point because what I'm dealing with is a lot of trauma at this point, and it makes it very hard. And you understand, I'm sure, trauma affects the frontal lobe.
Yes, it
It
does.
affects your problem solving, you know,
Yes.
your logic. And so at this point, I'm having to deal with that and trying to figure things out of, am I crazy? So after a while of seeing things happen and knowing that I'm doing the best I can absolutely do, knowing that, okay, this is not true. And then also the whole text message thing, I realized that it wasn't me, it was them. And then little by little, as I started to collect evidence, I started to prepare my daughters. I started to have them clean up and like lightweight pack, put things away. Okay, we're not going to keep this, we're going to throw this out. Or I started to do more research around the area to find places to live that were affordable. You know, just things like that, like gradually as time wore on. This is toward the end. And I knew that this was the end of the situation, that, you know, I had to make a break for it. I started to just prepare myself. You have to prepare yourself mentally, though.
Yeah.
You have to remind yourself that, no, I'm not crazy. What these people are saying about me is not true. What they're doing is not okay.
That part.
This is not what a man is supposed to do. Because I look back at my father. My dad was not controlling like that.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, you know, this is not healthy. I'm seeing the way they're interacting and what they told me before and presented before, and how that's not the case. And I'm thinking, okay, they lied. They're clearly not who they are. And she's going to, and I realized that she was not an ally. That was another thing. I realized that she was his ally and he was hers. And that I was never really seen as somebody who was a part of their unit. I was an opportunity for him to have another womb, to have more babies and sex, and for her to have help around the house so she can dump the kids on me, because that's exactly what was going on. And so it wasn't a situation where I was coming in as an equal. I was not. And it was not a situation where I was coming in to be there forever or to be there long term. I was not a long term situation, and none of the wives are. None of them are.
I mean, I'm trying to ask to get in their head, but if it's not long term, what is the pressing need? What is the desire to do it over and over again? What is that? Like, is it the conquest? You know what I'm saying? Is it to see whether or not we can do this? Is it to feed the machine? I mean, what would make someone do it, fail, do it again? And like you said, knowing that you didn't intend for me to continually be here. So what was this all about?
I think it was a mixture of all of those things. And the fail part, they're not failing because they're failing. They're failing because they want to fail. Like it's an end game for them. The end game was to find a woman who had money, who can get them introduced to people with power. Because I know they attach themselves to women who, you know, one woman worked in Washington that they were with. You know, I'm an actor. You know, you have other women who are doing certain things. One's super intelligent, and this one, she's an accountant, or she's, they're putting themselves, like they're positioning these women in their lives to get something out of them, whatever this something is.
So it's strategic. Again, it's a strategy. It's
Yes,
strategic.
it was a strategy. There was no, okay, she's going to be here for a long time. No, we're going to have her here until we don't want her here anymore. And depending,
Until she's outlived her usefulness.
exactly.
So
So,
I want to put, because you're using a word that for a lot of maybe our viewers, or Amuna's viewers rather, this word equality is a buzzword for them. So I want to be clear. I want to hear from you the clarity. Are you saying that you are acknowledging that you weren't equal to him, or that you weren't equal to her? Do
and
you? Okay, because there may be some who go, well, you're not supposed to be equal to him. He's a man.
mhm,
But they may have a different idea of what you're saying. Well, I didn't feel like an equal wife. Like this wife had more standing than I did, and I didn't feel like he was giving me equal attention to her, as opposed to you looking or vying for equal power with him. So could
mhm.
you give the listener some clarity on what you mean by equality?
Oh, yes. So no, not equal to him, because I didn't understand. I don't subscribe to the idea that I can be equal. Things can't be equal, but fair. Things
Right.
weren't fair between she and I, and they weren't equal. And what I meant by equal is equal to her, being that I have equal say in what happens in the household in regards to what wives are responsible for.
Good
I didn't
question.
have equal say to that. I didn't feel safe. My position was not safe in the
Right.
house. Like she knew she wasn't going anywhere.
She was
I'm the
secure.
one having to worry about whether I'm going to be thrown out. So I came into the situation thinking that I was going to have equal footing, as in equal respect, equal consideration,
Right.
equal, responsibility, whatever. And I find that this hierarchy,
Mm.
she's here and I'm here. I came in as help. I didn't come in as an equal or a wife. I was help.
Wait, do you think that if you did stay a little bit longer and you had a child with him, do you think that your position would have changed? Do you think that that's because we hear later that she uses her children as leverage? Do
Hmm.
you think that if you had a child by him, that your leverage would have changed also?
Absolutely. He was trying to impregnate me from day one.
How would
And it was a push to impregnate, and I didn't understand the push to impregnate, and so I figured it out though. It was so that I can stay in the house,
To
because
secure you.
yeah,
Hmm.
to secure the one, just so she can, I mean, even though he may not saw came or approach the situation as me staying long term, but he knew that a baby would have me around, even if I didn't
And
stay in the house, I would
So do
still
you
be.
think that that's why? Because earlier you said that more than just the sex, it was the frequency of the sex, which would also alarm her or alert her to the possibility of you becoming pregnant and going up that ladder of hierarchy. Right now, you were controllable, you were the outsider, but all of this continuous sex, if you were of childbearing age, then you could very clearly start to contribute in different ways that would make her then feel unsafe.
Yeah, absolutely. She didn't want me to get pregnant. I'm sure
But
she.
then this goes against all of what
The nation building.
we want
Shit.
all of these children. This flies in the face of this whole, let me build my tribe,
Right.
right? Because did any of the women have children for him besides?
No, never. They've been with hundreds, and this is not an exaggeration. You can see on the show
I,
how they run through women, right? But before the show, they were running through women. None of these women got pregnant. None.
seriously,
Hundreds.
hundreds?
That's a high number.
That's a very high number.
No,
I
but
mean,
again,
after
this is
after I came out with my interview, I had a lot of inbox messages from women who have known that family, who have lived with the family.
No,
Listen,
something is not. This is beyond something is not right. This is for those who just joined us. Look, when Amuna said, thank you for your time. This is very important information. It can be specific, suggestive, or it can be objective. It can be something that you can take and look in your niece or your daughter or yourself. You can be able to identify the signs because it's all a pattern. How people, I said this before, I'll continue to say because I think importantly is we're listening to what Ari is saying because as we said in the beginning of the show, oftentimes the voices of those who have experienced it are silenced. So I
hmm
think it's very important we're very interested in the story, right? And clearly many people are going to see it. And the second thing is to take something to take away. something to look into your own life and not just to sit there and judge. There are many people that we know of that espouse an ideology, and it's a little bit more dangerous because it has a religious component attached to it.
Yeah,
And
right.
the story and the lives of many of these people have not been told. Yeah? Children, women, even men who are pressured into these spaces. I think it's very important for us to continue to have this conversation respectfully beyond. So I just wanted to say that, as you said, hundreds
Mhm.
of women and lives have been touched. So that means at this point, she's his cohort. At this point,
Yeah,
she's in the.
yeah. She's the victim that became the victimizer. It's
And
classic
that's what happened.
Stockholm syndrome. You know,
Classic.
she knows this woman, from the account of other women, have seen her be beaten by him. Blood dripping down her face. They come out of the room. She talked about calling the ambulance. I got a concussion.
Meanwhile, he
And
has what they call the body count. It just goes back to this idea of who has a body count. And so, as these women are piling up in this social experiment, because basically what we're talking about is not nation building or families. This is a social experiment and hoping that some. But I think that, and that leads me to a question that I saw among the people, and I know we were going to have a whole Q&A period, but I think it's a good question. Knowing what you know now and having experienced what you've experienced so far, would you enter into another polygynous, and
She
why
said,
not?
no.
Well, okay, but and why not? Even if certain, so you don't think there's any type of redemption for this model, for this marriage model at all? Like, if there were other things in place, would you reconsider if you thought something, or you were once again convinced of a healthy environment? If you thought there were some kind of protections,
Mhm.
would you? Because you spoke earlier about Islam, and among Muslims there are certain protections in place, and that perhaps you didn't have those protections, and that's why you were exposed in this way. So if you felt that you had protections, if you felt like all of your recourse hadn't been taken away, would you really not reconsider polygyny as an option?
Mm-mm. No,
Mm,
that it's definitely is, and I have nothing against the construct because I don't believe that it was a construct that was the issue. Was the people involved that
mm,
was the issue. I believe that it can be a beautiful relationship construct. I really do, if it's practiced righteously. But unfortunately, it has to be. It boils down to the character of the man and the
mm,
women involved. If these people are not flying straight, if they're not righteous, if they're not doing it for the right reasons, it's going to fail. That's one. Two, for me, when it comes to polygyny, I am no longer, because that was my first experience with it, and I had
wow.
come out of a monogamous marriage, which was legal. So I had an experience in a monogamous marriage, and then I go into a polygynous marriage, and I have that experience, and then I come
Mm,
out of it, and I realize monogamy is better for me. I'd rather
mm,
my man have one woman than share multiple
mm,
wives for many reasons. One of the reasons is when I was in that house, after the first month, there was no sex. There was hardly, like, he would try to get it in,
mm,
but because of the fact that he would leave for work, or he was in that office, or she would just try to regulate the sex, that was an issue. The emotional
mm.
support. He was not able to emotionally
Right.
support me because he didn't have enough time to even. I felt like I didn't even know this dude. I'm like, you're trying to impregnate
Wow.
you, and I
Wow.
would tell him that. Like, I feel like you want me to have a baby for you, and I'm having a baby for a man I don't know. I need
Mm.
to know who you are, and we don't spend enough time together to know unless we're having sex. That was the only
But
time really spending, and
So
did
so
when,
you
sorry. So when he's doing the, I want to impregnate you. Ashley over there in the corner, like, like, is she still?
so of course she has to pretend that she's on board with everything. So
Oh
she,
God.
yeah,
does she want to
I
hold your hand like when
no,
it's your turn? I have
no,
questions.
but she did request to be in the room when we first made love.
Was she
Interesting.
in the corner? She's sitting
She was
in this
in bed.
armchair.
This
Huh?
was in bed like this,
Everything. Oh my, I'm sorry.
watching.
That,
She wants to see her competition. No, come on. Practically,
but
she wants to know what you're bringing.
that's a whole
She
nother.
wants to make sure you don't have an extra stroke she don't know about. That's what that is.
Listen,
I'm
that's probably
telling you
why
what
we
it
got
is. I'm
it.
telling
Listen,
you. But back to this idea of the of not of the emotional access. Do you think that he was unable to negotiate emotional access with you because he had to manage so many emotional spaces? Because it's bad enough that he has to now divide this one man has to now divide his emotional investment between two women. There are children involved.
yes.
So
Yes.
what emotional investment are they getting as the father, because again, that was one of the pulls. That was the benefit box column. That now I have this father figure for these young people who are growing up. Is he checking any of those boxes? The benefit for the children, is that bearing out at all? These children need emotional support. You have upset the reality, and so the first thing we now need to do, from my perspective as a mother, is stabilize this child. This child now needs to understand what this new situation all the adults have agreed on, right? And now I need to feel safe. We talked earlier about not feeling safe. How much more so for the children? So, I mean, did he feel like he was invested in sitting down and making himself present and a stabilizing it? You can trust me. You can depend on me. I'm here for you. This is what we want the man involved for to begin with. Because we're saying that the children don't have that. And we want our children to feel like there's a presence. So did he, in the midst of all of the sexual conquest, in the midst of all this power and control, in the midst of the power play between the two women, say anything about the stepchildren who, according to him, are his real children, which is why they must have his name? Did he do anything to influence their reality?
He started off again, first month. I told y'all it was great.
It was great. Yeah, that's the
Spending time, like he'd eat dinner with us, that kind of thing, you know. But toward the middle of the 9 months, there was no presence, you know. Even I noticed it in his children. His daughter particularly, she was very, very needy and very clingy.
Yeah.
And she would do it right off. And people have said this about when they see this on the show, they see the children and they see the dynamic and how the children cling to every woman that comes in right away. They're attention starved. They're not getting what they need. They're being ignored by their mother and avoided. They're being avoided by their father.
It's an anxious attachment style where they're looking like, are you my mom? Are you my mom? Or, you know, looking to everybody to kind of give them that comfort that it's clear that something else.
Yeah, he's not. He wasn't present. He was not present.
No bedtime stories. No cow jumped over the moon. No designing virtual experiences.
You know what he do? They want to see. They want Papa. You know, they want Papa to come in and tell them good night. He'll come in and tell them good night, but he didn't do it every night. But he'll come in and tell them good night. I would be the one reading the stories at night. It was a treat to have Papa come in.
Wow.
But they would only see him in the mornings. And sometimes not in the morning, because sometimes he'll be the first one up in the house because he's up and he's in his office. And then we get up, we're making breakfast and we're with the children. Then if he comes out for lunch, most times he didn't, we had to bring lunch to him. He would come out for dinner. And that was when they would see him, during dinner. And sit at the table, he'd come out. But then there were times when he couldn't come out for dinner. So I think most of the time that they saw him was during dinner. If I had to, you know, tally it up all out of all the times throughout the day, it was during dinner. And it was very brief. I mean, who eats for 3-4 hours, right? So you're eating for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes at bed, then you're out of there.
So can we, and Mona, I really want to go back to what you said earlier, because I think that in the beginning, in the early stage of the conversation, we talked about Ashley's need to command the kitchen. And you wanted to ask, to maybe kind of consider, was there a reason why she, and you already said that it's because she had time to escape from the family. But would you, in hindsight, agree or consider that there was some component of control for her there? Because one of the things that we've been told as melanated women is that the way to the man's heart is through his stomach. And if she's the only one cooking, then that's the area that she continues to have praise in. She's the one that has given children. She's the one who's feeding his belly. And and you're now saying that the only time you actually had family time was around whatever she cooked. So this is why you don't get to be in that space yet, or whenever you finally do, that's more about making you contribute to the family than sharing power with you. But in the beginning, it was more about not sharing power with you. This is one of the places where she got to shine. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was a situation where our diets were very restricted. I had to eat what they ate. I couldn't deviate from it. I couldn't bring in anything else other than what they wanted in the house and what she cooked. So she had to show me all of what she cooked when I did start getting in the kitchen. And
did you have to cook the way she cooked?
Yes. And if I didn't do it right, they talk about it.
Right. Wow.
So she had a certain way that she made the chickpeas, and she made the kale, and she made the lettuce and whatever. And I had to do it exactly that way. I had to use. I mean, I'm from New Orleans. I love to cook, and we have a very vast array of cuisine there.
Seasoning, that's right.
Yes, and I wanted to put some seasoning on that stuff, and I couldn't.
Wow.
Like, she would not allow
She
me.
said she couldn't season the chickpeas. You guys keep saying my mic is muffled. My apologies. I hear you guys pretty clear. I'm not sure if it's being muffled on the YouTube side, but my apologies. I'm sorry. So you couldn't season the chickpeas with no Zatarain, no?
No, man.
No Cajun spices.
No Cajun spices, no blackened chickpeas.
It wasn't until Ashley left the house, when she ran off to Cincinnati. That's when I started being able to actually cook food that I wanted to cook.
Oh,
Did he like it? Hold on, did he like it?
He loved it.
And to Maya's point, that may have been like, if he starts liking her food and then I'm going to lose my footing.
Yeah.
So
text message that she sent him, when I went through the text messages, one of the conversations that they were having was about an argument that we all had, and she was like, "Ooh, I almost thought I lost you, boo. I'm glad you came in and said what you said at that time, because I thought you were on her side."
Oh wow! So it's really just this really wow.
That's what she said, and I mean, the text messages were what really just like did it for me. Often, because I'm watching these people. They're playing a game.
They're playing a game.
I am not involved in the game. Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm not made aware of the game.
Right.
And it's like
you are the game.
Me as the audience, and you're seeing what's happening, but the characters don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the person's around the corner, and so I'm reading these text messages, and I'm like, wow, this woman called me stupid. She called me dumb. She was like, well, she's not intelligent. So, and I know you don't. And he's like, well, you know, I like intelligent women. And she's like, yeah, well, she's not. I don't think she's fit to have your child. These are things that this woman was saying about me. And I am not the only woman who has gone through the phone. There have been other wives that have done something similar. And they said the same thing. They were like, man, you know, they were talking bad about me. They were saying this, they were saying that, you know, well, we'll make sure she does this. We'll make sure she doesn't do that. Well, you make sure, like he told her one time, okay, you don't need to be on your phone because we don't want Ari to do it.
Wow.
So you need to set an example for her. So he would tell her, don't be on your cell phone, because he didn't want me to be on mine. So he would also have her come in and do damage control too. So if something happens, regardless of who caused it, he'd make her come in and fix it. However, whatever that looks like. So she was the one that she was the go-to. Like, when he needed something, he would go to her. I never forget, it was, what did he say he needed? He said he needed a remedy for something, a headache or something. And he hits her up. He's like, you know, and this is crazy enough, it's through the group chat that he's reaching out to her and asking her. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you just text her? Why you know, and you know that I have a knowledge of herbs as well. So like, why are you asking just her and not me? And if that's the case, then y'all should have a sidebar conversation.
But I want you to see me talking to her.
Exactly.
Yeah, he would defer to her for everything. I never forget, one time we were watching a movie as a family, and she was still upstairs, and then she comes downstairs, and he had his head laying on my lap, and then he gets up and he goes over and lays on her lap. And I was like, okay, you know, that wasn't an issue. The baby comes over, but I noticed that whenever the dynamic was of all of us together, he would make sure he'd shift focus from me to her. And this happened a lot. I noticed that a lot. I never forget, we're sitting at the table and we're eating, and he tells me, you know, he compliments my teeth. And he's like, you have really nice teeth. And she's like, really, boo? And she looks at him, and I'm like, wow.
So it's clear that
like sometimes I thought he was doing shit to piss her off. Like, I thought he was like, but then it was weird, because I'd see him placate to her, but then sometimes he'd go against her to make her mad for whatever reason. It was weird. It was a crazy power play that I was witnessing in the house. But I knew that out of all the crazy back and forth that they had, I was still the enemy. I had no ally in that house.
So you were sleeping with the enemy.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you, Ari. We've been talking about this in the context of marriage, why are we calling it marriage? Did you feel, I mean, what are we calling, what are we using to accreditate this as you were a wife? Because you're already saying you didn't feel like a wife, you didn't function as a wife. So why are we calling you a wife in this dynamic? You felt like the help, you felt like the all par, the babysitter, you felt like the cog, there was the machine, the part of the machine that's keeping those two together. So I'm not talking about you specifically. I am asking you because you're the panelist, but we find that in these types of dynamics that there are multiple women, only one is necessarily the legitimate wife or the legal wife, and yet everyone is sharing this term, and they're not necessarily sharing any of the weight of the relationship. So in hindsight, would you still say that you were a wife in that dynamic? Were you his wife as far as you're concerned, and why? Why would you?
Well, first off, she wasn't a wife either. They weren't legally married.
Right.
Okay. That's good to know.
So the label, it was just the label. I was a wife because he said I was.
See?
I wasn't a wife in any other regard.
Wow.
There was no signing of a will or anything or an estate.
So we pinky sweared ourselves into a holy covenant.
Pretty much. I mean, we didn't even have a ceremony.
Right.
There was a
Okay.
ceremony. There was nothing that solidified me as a wife.
How does that make you feel having to say that? Like, is that a problem for you now? Because remember, you went to your father with, I'm going into this marriage. This man is going to be my husband. I'm going to be a wife. You're a father who has very clear ideas about what marriage looks like. So now this is falling apart. You're going back to your father's house, back to your family, having not had any of the protections of wifehood. So in hindsight, how does that make you feel? And do you think that maybe that's one of the, on the other column, we did our benefits column, we're trying to be fair, but on the loss side, that kind of loss of public legitimacy, legal legitimacy, is that a fair kind of concession, like something you give up in order to be part of this kind of dynamic? What would you say to that?
Absolutely. I gave up, having the rights of a wife to be a wife. That makes sense. I didn't have, any legal or financial protection. So if tomorrow he got killed or something happens, there would be no protection for me and my children. If I had given birth to a child, there was no protection for me and my children. So, or said child. So there was really nothing that he put in place. And this was, of course, I'm expecting it going in, because he did tell me that we would have a ceremony once I came. And he gave me this whole spiel about, well, me and Ash didn't have a ceremony. We didn't have a official ceremony because we were waiting for our wife to come home.
Our wife. So that makes why Ashley called you the wife. Again, you were not for him. You were for them. So even he shared this language of our wife. So when she said, when you were in together and she said, this is my wife, that wasn't something she was making up. That was something they had discussed and planned.
Pretty
you
much.
Belong to them.
Yeah. One of the scarier dynamics or scarier scenarios for second wives coming into these situations is you come into an already established relationship. Mm-hmm. You're coming into a situation where these people share memories, they share secrets, they share everything, and you know nothing. Mm-hmm. You know nothing. And they are each other's ally at the end of the day. I know a sister in a polygamous marriage right now, and her and the husband got into it because he wanted to bring a woman in, but he slept with a woman, and she contracting some type of infection, and she was pissed about it. And the other wife ain't say nothing. The first one, like, she left her to dry. Like, you out there, y'all go argue, and I'm gonna stay out of it. So she realized that there was no real ally in that situation. That this woman was always going to be loyal to her husband and not the wife. And so women have to remember that when you're coming in as a second wife, sis, ain't no loyalty from them to you. It's the loyalty between them two. And it makes sense. I mean, they've been together longer than you have with them, and they've known each other longer than they've known you. So you are the stranger. So that right there is one of the biggest fear factors for me entering a relationship like that again, because I didn't realize that until I was already in it.
But you know what we're already describing is very common, very, 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 very common. But there are instances, though, where the sisterhood develops. It's not necessarily in the healthy marriage context, but they become so connected to each other that they leave the man. They become.
I've
I wanted to ask you, like, since you have now been part of this world. I mean, we have been around sisters for a very long time, so we've seen how this plays out in many different ways. I wanted to ask you, have you seen sometimes it goes the other way, where the allies become the two women and they decide that he's the common enemy, either because they've become truly like sisters, or because they have replaced him sexually.
mhm,
This does sometimes because the man is in the office or minding his business, or so far on his power trip that he has neglected them in this sexual space, and now they're finding other ways to lean on each other even in that capacity. And so they decide they don't need him at all at this point. And sometimes we see these women go off together.
mhm.
Sometimes they decide we're both being abused as women, and as sisters they go off together. So sometimes what you're saying happens more often statistically, that the second wife, becomes the outsider. She comes in as an intruder and leaves as the outsider. But sometimes this paradigm fills a void between women.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
I've not seen it personally, but I've
Mm.
heard it happening. I've not seen it though. I've not seen it. Most of the stories that I've actually seen, or the situations I've seen, has been the second wife coming in and as a
Right.
stranger and being thrown out as a stranger.
Yeah, that's the most
Or
common.
I've even
Absolutely.
seen more of the dynamic of um, the first wife leaving,
Mm.
the wife staying.
Right.
That
And
kind
he's
of
back to monogamy.
right,
And then
exactly.
he's right back to
Then you get
monogamy.
leveled up, and then it's this revolving. But for the sake of time, I definitely value your time and value
Oh,
the time with Sister
thank you
Maya.
so much.
And the children have been so nice to me, allowing me to have this conversation.
Oh,
But I wanted to ask, as we finished giving them a picture, you took us through beautifully through a lot of the things that happened, and so now for those who are like, okay, how did she escape, right? How do you get out the house, and how was that for your children? Were they afraid? Were they uncertain? Were you afraid? Did you stay in where you were? Did you go back home? Did you have a place to live? Because some people, they may leave and they don't have a place to live. They end up homeless. They end up in shelters, right? So just so that we can progress the story a little bit, how do you get out, and do you get out to safety, as some will say, and how did that affect your children?
so I got out by moving out. He helped me find a place. And he promised to give me $10,000 to move out. This was, and I found later that he texted her and said, I have to pay 10K to get rid of this woman.
What's your severance pay?
Right, exactly. It was, I guess that was, but I found
Leverage package.
borrowing money. He wasn't making the money. He was borrowing. He was scheming people, lying and saying he's creating apps and websites and never deliver, that kind of thing. And so he must have gotten money from somewhere. And he sent me, when I left the house, he sent me 8K. It was supposed to be 10, but he sent me 8. This ensured that I was able to pay rent and
Mhm.
take care of myself. So I did get an apartment and I stayed in Atlanta, and I was there for a year and a half.
So he did help you.
He did.
He
He
didn't
did.
even just leave you to be floundering. He did help you to stand on your feet.
He did
Um,
help.
okay, good.
Absolutely. And I can't. I can say that I can't. Even though
Yes.
the everything was horrible, he abused me. He did give me money to leave the house.
So that's what that's really where I want to ask you, because we've already touched on the fact that you were unhappy, you were abused. This man was clearly narcissistic. What do you think, if you had to look back and give it an answer, motivated him to help you? Like, is that part of his narcissism? Was it your don't talk, this is your I'm not that bad, don't talk badly about me once you leave? Like, what do you think it compelled him to give you anything? Because I mean, honestly, if I was watching this now, the whole time I'm team Ari, and then you're like, yeah, but then he gave me 8K. I'm like, okay, so he wasn't that bad because he gave you 8K. So do you think that was part of the plan?
Yeah. So two things. He gave me that money to keep me quiet.
Mm.
He didn't want me to talk. Okay. Because he's made all the other women on the show sign NDA. I didn't sign it,
Mm.
but he
Non
all the
non-disclosure. So just for people understand these acronyms, India was a non-disclosure agreement.
so a non-disclosure agreement would basically hold these women legally accountable if they spoke about what happened in the house. They can't share text messages, pictures, or anything. I, on the other hand, did not have an NDA, but he banked on me just being silent. He figured if he gave me money to move or help me, then he's not that bad, as you said. And also, he wanted to
And you're
have
also an actress. Like there's something for you to lose by doing that too.
Absolutely. And he knew that I had connections and I knew people. He just didn't want me to talk because he knew that I can get far with the information. So he gave me money to shut me up, and he gave me money also to still have sexual access to me.
Wow.
He still wanted to come and have sex with me.
Yes. So he still owed you $2,000, so he still has a reason to call you.
Exactly.
Honey, I study people for it. This is what I was trained to do. Sit back here and study people. So my questions don't come from nowhere.
He still wanted to have access. He wanted me to shut up. So I just want him to know that I ain't shutting up. Thanks for the money, though.
So he really didn't want you to go. Ashley wanted you to go.
No, the thing with him is, and he said this before in a conversation, and she said it too, that he can get along with any woman because he was a womanizer before the whole polygyny thing. He was just sleeping with a bunch of different women. He would tell me that he told me the story. He told all the other wives the same story of how he was dating like multiple women. He had a closet in his condo where he had each shelf had the woman's name on it. And he would remember their birthdays and Valentine's Day. And this man told me this. He told me that he had sex when he was 16 with his 16-year-old girlfriend's mother. Important. He was living in the house and having sex with the mom and the daughter. See? So this is a man who has a illness, a mental, emotional, psychological illness when it comes to sex and whatever. He's been abused and traumatized as a child. So he's basically, he's projecting all of these experiences and traumas onto women. And he's figured out a way to be able to do it in a way that, I don't know, that looks good. I don't know.
But there's no attachment. Look at this though. He's saying that he's managing multiple women, but he's actually not. He's not emotionally invested. He's not physically present. He is not involved. He's just having sexual access and relationships with them, which is not having women. That is not, but unless we're considering women possessions and artifacts and accessories. He doesn't have any relationships. So it's easy to have multiples of something you're not invested in any of.
Yes.
And I think that conversation needs to be had. These men are not having multiple women. They are defiling, to use one of the terms he would use, multiple women.
Yes. Yeah. He doesn't have
compromising.
Even her. There's no loyalty from him to her. Even though it's only when we're in a dynamic of having a sister wife in the house and then them two. That's when you see their loyalty then. But his loyalty to her is trash as well. And here's why I say that. There's a text message that I shared that a sister wife before me, he and her remain friends. And he would send her messages and text he would complain about Ashley to her.
Yeah, I think I heard that one.
And he did that a lot. So he sent her this text message that Ashley sent to him after the first show aired and he slept with the girl the first night he went out with her while Ashley was pregnant. And she sends this long drawn out text about them lying to the world about who they are and her, being physically abused. She mentions this. She was physically and emotionally attacked by him. She was like, I'm afraid for you to be destroyed by these women and I'm trying to protect you from these women. Why am I wanting to do this X, Y, and Z? So you can hear the Stockholm syndrome. You can hear the trauma that this woman is dealing with. You can hear, the victimization. She is a victim too. But she's become a victimizer. So, yeah.
Did you know any of these things about him before? Like, did you know? Because this is a show. So just for the listening audience to know, this is public. So people have been watching this show. Did you watch the show? Did you know anything about this man? Or all you knew is what he told you about who he was and she told you about who they were?
Yes. I dated them before the show. The show came long after me.
So it's good for people who's listening to know because people are going to say, but it's on the show. How did you not know? So it's important for people listening to get the timeline.
Now that we segue to the show, I didn't want to too much, I wanted Ari to be able to tell her story, but concerning the show, I wanted to talk about the petition that you have. But before I get to petition, could it be possible that this show, as you said, she was complaining about in the text how she looked to the world, that this show since they did it so many times, was what they needed to be able to get a reflection mirrored back to themselves. So in a way, it's a blessing in disguise because before they're doing it and no one is really seeing except for the
Right.
people. But now you're doing it on a world stage and you
And
can't deny any longer that this is an issue. So talk to that if you can, and then we'll talk. I'll let you talk a little bit about the petition. But go ahead.
yes, you're absolutely right. I think they saw the show as a way for them to gain fame, money, because that's what they want. They're attention whores. And
Right.
so they saw this as a great opportunity to create a facade, make money from it, have this disillusioned idea, grandiose idea of themselves and being so spiritual and so innovative, whatever.
Right.
But this was definitely the mirror that they needed held up. And this was also a way for not just women who've been victimized to come out and say, you've done this, you're wrong for this, you're wrong for that. But now you have the public. Now you
Mm-hmm.
have under the court or in the court of public opinion.
Yes.
And people are seeing through the cracks as people are watching the show. I'm looking at the commentary because I didn't watch the show. I just saw commentary and things that they would say. I'm like, dang, they spot on. They saw
Mm-hmm.
right through a lot of these facades that these people created. And so when it came to the show most certainly exposed them for who they are and showed them who they were. Because in that letter that she sent him, she clearly states that we're lying.
Yeah.
And she felt remorse for the fact that they're lying to the world.
To the
And
world.
she
Yeah.
even said that, with him sleeping with the girl Jocelyn, she says that it's you with you sleeping with her because she said something about their marriage dying many deaths. She
Yeah.
said that the other girl was a death that they died, but then when he slept with Jocelyn on national television,
Yeah.
that was another piece of her that died. And she said it's a good thing that we can save face by saying that it's for TV. You see,
Yeah.
so people are seeing these people be narcissistic, controlling, evil, but they can say it's good. It's a good storyline, or we're just doing it for TV. So she thought in her mind that it was some type of saving grace to be able to say, yeah, well,
It's
we
reality
had to lie
TV.
and say that, but you can't keep the truth hidden, especially
Right.
when it's in the light.
Right.
They put themselves in a light, being greedy, being narcissists and weirdos, and they put themselves in a public
Right.
spotlight, not realizing that people are going to see right
People
through
are
them,
gonna
and
see.
they have. So I think it was a double-edged sword for them.
Yeah, I think
It
so.
was.
So
Yeah.
to your petition now, share your thoughts on what it's on. What is this? It's on
Change.org.
change.org. Yes. So go ahead and share with the listening audience about the petition.
So the petition was started by a woman who knows them.
Oh.
Okay.
Uh
So when
oh.
I tell you that these people have spread destruction and chaos and terror, not just to the women that they were with, but to men too. Like he's swindled a lot of people out of money. During that, what was it, 2011, when he was convicted of money laundering $45,000 from charter schools in Ohio and small business owners. One of the small business owners was a Black woman. Like he was taking money and still taking money from people. And so the person that made this petition is somebody who has known him for over 18 years.
Oh
And she
wow.
knew about all of this stuff. And she was very shocked to see that this was what he was. She knew some of the criminal activity or some of the dishonest things, but the whole abuse and all this
Everything
other
else. Yeah.
yeah, she was really blown away by it, and she was hurt, and she felt like she needed to make an atonement because she didn't believe it initially until I
Mm.
came out with my story. And then she reached out, we talked, and she said, I'm creating this petition. We got to get them taken off the show. But there's another man that reached out to me that Dimitri has ripped off, taken his money, resources, what have you. There's a few other people, like it's so much. The web that these people have weaved around themselves, and the people that are involved in their lives, and the people that I'm meeting through them, by way of the trauma that they've experienced
Right.
from them, is
Right.
unbelievable. It's something that I swear I can't make up. And if there is a movie or book deal, God damn it, we can all create a book and a movie based on these people's lives and
I mean,
the experiences that we've had with them, because it's mind blowing. It really is. And everybody says the same thing, including this woman, including the man, including all the extra wives, other wives. They all say the same thing. How did they keep getting away with this? This man was convicted of money laundering, and he's walking, or he's, you know, or he's been ripping people off and nothing has happened. Like, I just don't understand how he is still able to.
I mean, if we believe in the creator, we believe that there's just weights and balances. Like you said, we live in a world that oftentimes people don't believe those who are victimized, right? And
That's true.
so people, in this case, people who have become proficient at deceiving others, it takes a longer time
Hmm.
for the two circles, I mean, the two, for it to connect. And what's happening now is everything is converging
Yes.
because they went after being on TV and really magnifying their deficiencies,
Hmm.
right? And I
Hmm.
think as I watch, and my thoughts go out to all those involved, even the ones who have to, it's been uh, cemented into the minds of the people on TV. But when they went for those two at the same time, when they went for the two, it was like, aha, your hand is not going to come out this cookie jar. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So when they went for two at this last season at the same time, I think the last one was when they brought in the sister from South Africa. Because she ended up being the one that broke this whole thing wide open once
She
again,
sure
right?
did. She sure did. She
Yeah,
sure.
so it's like you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, and you do it one more time, right?
Yep.
And this one more time was all it took for all of what we're talking about
The house of
to
cards.
the house of cards comes tumbling down.
Yep.
So, you know, this conversation has been fire. I
It
thank
has.
you so much
I
for
did
um
this.
for coming on. I want to apologize everybody. I was late. It was my bad. I had the wrong time zone in my mind.
It's okay.
Um, but I definitely glad that I waited and that we were able and that Sister Mayana came through as always, and we're able to kind of not just make it a girl, did you hear? You know what I'm saying? But make it a learning moment and a teaching moment. So Ari, if there's anything else you want to say to the people, go ahead, let them know at this point.
I would say, please believe the victim. Please. Can we please just stop this culture of not listening to women and children when they tell you that something is wrong or something has been done to them? Hear them out. Ask questions. Investigate before you come to judgment, because so much of this is happening right now, and
Yeah,
so many women have died because
yeah,
people didn't believe them. Children have died because somebody didn't believe them. We have got to start believing the victims. It's too much of this happening for us not to. It's too much of it being revealed or coming to the surface or to the light for us not to. Another thing is, for the sisters who are considering this lifestyle, honey, vet, do everything possible to do that. If and listen to your intuition. Never doubt your intuition. This is something that I learned. I did not listen to my intuition when it would tell me certain things, or I would feel certain things, because I wanted to believe the people involved. Don't ever do that. Don't dishonor yourself, because that is doing yourself a great dishonor and disservice, not listening to your spirit. We have an intuition, women particularly, a very keen intuition, and it's put there in place to protect us. Because we're not physically able to protect ourselves, our intuition is our
mm-hmm.
superpower. And the minute you do not honor that, you suffer. And I suffered because I did not listen. So I want to let you know, if you're out there and you're considering this lifestyle or you're in it now, listen to your intuition, your gut. It is there to save you.
That's you wrapped it up for me. You wrapped it up. Mariana, you good? Thank you so much, Ari. We're honored that you came through, that you were so transparent. May these words fall on the ears of those who are meant to hear it. May you take heed. May you keep your support system around you. May you know that you are loved. May you listen to those who are telling you that they are in pain or they are hurt. May you, give a listening ear so that each one teach one. You have to help one another. I want to thank you for tuning in. My name is Amuna. We'll see you again next time. All right?
All right.
So.
Peace.